141. I saw something ominous. Lynn welcomed his first divination class at Hogwarts. The timetable said this week's session would be held with Slytherin House. Edgar grumbled as he checked the location again. Why did Professor Trelawney pick such a unique spot for a classroom? I feel like I lost half my life climbing these stairs. Lynn, Ollie, and Edgar were winding their way up the narrow spiral staircase inside the North Tower. I bet half the students who take this course will regret it after that climb, Edgar added. After what felt like forever, they reached the top and found a trapdoor set into the ceiling with a silver ladder dangling below it. We didn't go the wrong way, did we? Edgar asked, peering at the trapdoor and the timetable. Is the classroom up there? Looks more like an attic. We'll know once we open it, Lynn said, and reached up to push. Creak. The trapdoor swung up. A warm rush of air hit them, carrying a pungent, cloying scent. Tea leaves gone strange, cheap perfume, burning herbs, and sweet incense, all fermenting in the confined space until it made their heads swim. It was almost on par with Professor Quirrell's unmistakable garlic. The three exchanged looks and climbed up one by one. The classroom was less a classroom and more an old-fashioned tea house tucked into an attic. The circular room was bigger than they'd expected, but all the windows were covered with heavy, dark red curtains. Light came only from small wall lamps with crimson shades and dozens of candles of varying heights. Low round tables, stools, and cushion-strewn armchairs were scattered about. A monstrous fireplace dominated one wall. Despite early September in the Scottish Highlands, it threw out an almost obscene amount of heat, crackling and popping in the sealed room. Lynn could handle hot or smelly, but not both at once, and certainly not with poor lighting to boot. He went straight to the nearest window, pulled the curtain aside, and shoved it open. A cool breeze poured in, cutting the stale odor and taking some of the heat with it. Much better, Lynn said, satisfied. They found a larger round table by the window and sat, waiting for the professor. Before Trelawney arrived, Malfoy did. As usual, he was trailed by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy scowled at the cramped, fragrant room, then his eyes landed on the window table and paused on Lynn. During the holidays, Lucius Malfoy had asked Draco how things were going with Lynn. Draco, distracted by mocking Potter in his second year, had lied that they were on good terms. His father had clearly seen through it and cut off his summer pocket money. Draco couldn't tell his father the truth now. Goyle, Crabbe, find your own seats. Don't follow me. Crabbe and Goyle blinked, then squeezed themselves into the nearest table by the fire. Draco plastered on an air of nonchalance and sat at the empty seat at Lynn's table. Morning, Lynn, he said. Lynn blinked. He did have business dealings with the Malfoy family, but that was not the same as friendship. Morning, Malfoy, he replied. Why aren't you with them? He nodded toward Crabbe and Goyle, who were flushed from the heat. Draco glanced and offered a plausible-sounding excuse. There wasn't enough room over there. He couldn't very well say, my father told me to get close to you. Lynn looked at the hulking bodies of Crabbe and Goyle, then at their comparatively roomy table. The excuse actually worked. Edgar didn't react much. He was fine having another person to talk to, so long as Malfoy didn't start anything. Ollie barely glanced at Draco. He had heard Lucius Malfoy had been a Death Eater before Voldemort's fall and kept a wary distance. For a moment, the room hummed with an awkward silence. It didn't last. As the hour approached, other students taking divination climbed up and squeezed into the attic. The room soon grew crowded and noisy. Ding, ding, ding. The trapdoor opened again, and Professor Trelawney floated in. Before she could say hello, she gave a sharp gasp. Ah! The students started. Trelawney pointed a trembling finger at the window behind Lynn. Her magnified eyes were wide with alarm. Who? Who has disrupted the delicate balance in this sacred room of prophecy, the most fitting for opening the inner eye and communing with the world? This chilly, treacherous wind, this blinding light, they will interfere with the threads of fate. They will frighten away the spirits that reveal the future. Lynn stood up awkwardly, crossed to the window, closed it, and drew the curtains. The attic immediately returned to its dim, stuffy, scented hush. Trelawney visibly relaxed. Welcome, welcome, children, to this observatory of fate, this hall for peering through the veil of time, she intoned, arms wide and shawl fluttering. Here, You shall step into the mysterious river of divination. Here you shall search for the patterns of fate hidden within the ordinary. You will discover whether you possess the precious inner eye that sees through the mist. Most of the students exchanged bewildered looks, some suppressed laughter. Edgar was one of them. Trelawney seemed unconcerned. This term, we shall first learn one of the most basic and most spirit-testing methods of divination, tasseomancy. She gestured to the teacups on the tables. Brew a cup for yourself. Drink slowly and focus, letting the tea leaves settle into the bottom. Then exchange cups with your neighbor. Study carefully the shapes the residue forms. You will find in them whispers of fate, hints the future offers you. The students set to work. Lynn followed the steps, measured the leaves, poured hot water, waited as the steam rose. The tea smelled normal enough and tasted like ordinary tea, nothing remarkable. When he'd finished, he leaned over the cup to see the leaves. They hadn't unfurled. Small, tightly curled clumps sat at the bottom. He wondered if the tea was just poor quality. He was about to hand the cup to Edgar when Malfoy, having already finished, pushed his empty cup toward Lynn. Lynn swapped cups. Malfoy took Lynn's cup and peered down, then froze. He looked at Lynn, looked back at the tea, and then frantically flipped through a copy of Unfogging the Future on the table, searching for what clumped, ununfurled leaves might mean. Lynn turned Malfoy's cup over in his hands. Malfoy's leaves had unfurled and formed a vague shape at the bottom. Squinting, he thought he could make out a bird with a sharp beak, an eagle, perhaps. He was puzzling over that when Professor Trelawney suddenly gave a trembling gasp somewhere else in the room. "Oh, my dear, I see. The grim. A dark shadow looms over you. You shall leave this classroom forever." A Slytherin girl's face drained of color at that pronouncement. Trelawney moved through the tables, murmuring prophecies and peering into cups. She soon noticed Malfoy, head bent over his book, and glided over. "Let me see, my dear." She took Lynn's cup, misplaced in the shuffle, out of Malfoy's hands. Trelawney brought her face close to the rim, scrutinizing the small clumps at the bottom. For a moment she simply stared, as if forming a reading. Then her gaze snagged on Lynn's eyes. They met. There was a crisp sound. Trelawney's hand jerked. The teacup slipped and smashed on the floor, porcelain scattering across the boards. But she didn't seem to register the breakage. Her body went slack, and her face drained of color. Her eyes glazed over, unfocused. The room held its breath. A hoarse, terrible voice issued from her lips. "I see nothing." She had hardly finished the words when she collapsed to the floor, as if the effort had taken all the life from her. Lynn couldn't help the small, dry, impressive bag that slipped out. Professor Trelawney fainted. When the news reached her, Professor McGonagall hurried up to the North Tower without a word. She didn't waste time on questions. She briskly sent Trelawney to the school infirmary to see Madame Pomfrey. With the professor gone, the class couldn't continue. Lynn's first divination lesson at Hogwarts ended abruptly. The students packed their things amid a buzz of conversation and filed out of the hot, strange attic classroom. Lynn, Ollie, and Edgar followed the crowd down the spiral staircase. Malfoy trailed a little behind, his brow furrowed. He had been hoping that sitting at the same table would give him a chance to talk to Lynn and make their friendship feel natural. First, Trelawney's bizarre classroom, and then the sudden dismissal had spoiled that plan. He quickened his pace and slid into the trio's line. "Lynn," he began, fishing for something to talk about. "About the tea leaves earlier. Mine." He faltered, choosing his words. Lynn glanced at him, guessing he just wanted a conversation starter. He adopted a mock-serious tone and improvised, since he really didn't know anything about divination. Based on my years of superficial study of the occult, combined with the orientation of the cup, the light at the time, and the general returning to basics, chaotic and unclear state of the leaves." His voice grew more mysterious, and Malfoy looked entirely confused. "The revelation I've read is that you should stay away from sharp-beaked animals." Malfoy blinked. The answer sounded like nonsense, but somehow exactly like Lynn. The next day, the morning potions class had just ended. Lynn packed up slowly, heading for the Great Hall for lunch. The dungeon's mingled scents still clung to his robes, but what he replayed in his mind was Snape's strange behavior. Instead of following their year's syllabus, Snape had jumped ahead and taught them the wolfsbane potion, used to prevent werewolves from losing their minds at the full moon. That alone was odd, but Snape had layered on an extra requirement that baffled everyone. Make sure the potion's original effect is completely intact, but do everything possible to make it taste disgusting. Most students were stunned. They hadn't even mastered the standard recipe yet, much less how to alter taste while preserving efficacy, especially pushing it toward revolting. It was a puzzle bordering on heresy in potions class. Most, of course, did not include Lynn. With his potion's favor ability, tweaking flavor was child's play, and making it disgusting was absurdly fun. While his classmates produced strangely colored failures or safe, bland, standard versions, Lynn's cauldron became a festival of olfactory crimes. He brewed a potion that looked normal in hue, but the smell alone could make someone's face turn green. It combined the reek of canned herring with the pungency of lutefisk, with faint notes of half-month-old trash and a rotting marsh. When Snape caught a whiff, he immediately moved the class to the empty room next door and strictly ordered that Lynn's cauldron stay put. Before class ended, Lynn carefully bottled his finished potion and brought it to Snape for inspection. Even through the stopper, the terrible scent seemed to seep out. Snape stared at the bottle with his mouth twitching. His Adam's apple bobbed as if he were fighting to keep from gagging. Underneath the contortion, Lynn thought he saw something like pleasure at the success. Bears. Snape's voice came strained. Gag meets the requirements. Gag icacy testing will be conducted later. Hufflepuff, +5 points. Lynn stared. Snape had practically been on the verge of vomiting, and yet had granted points. He wondered, not entirely seriously, whether Snape had some masochistic streak. Walking into the Great Hall after class, Lynn found the usual bustle and the comforting smell of food. He drifted along the long tables, glancing toward the Slytherin end. Something white caught his eye. He stopped and looked more closely. Malfoy sat near the front, a little pale, his arm in a sling with bandages showing. Malfoy? Lynn slid into the empty seat beside him. What happened to your arm? Quidditch practice? Malfoy's instinct had been to head past with his head down, but being spotted and then asked flushed his face with embarrassment. He remembered Lynn's tea-leaf prophecy, stay away from sharp-beaked animals. Merlin, was Lynn actually good at divination? It's nothing, Malfoy muttered. During Care of Magical Creatures class, I was injured by a creature, a hippogriff, Buckbeak. He almost said beast out of habit, then caught himself when he remembered Lynn liked magical creatures. Lynn looked surprised. Care of Magical Creatures? Buckbeak's quite well behaved when you do things right. How did you upset him? Malfoy went briefly silent. He could not bring himself to admit he'd thought a hippogriff looked ridiculous and, trying to show off, had ignored Hagrid's instructions. He'd struck a pose, Buckbeak had lashed out, and Malfoy had fallen, smacking his arm on a rock hard enough to make him want to cry. Too humiliating to say. Who knows, he said instead, vague and evasive. Then, changing tack, he added, your tea-leaf thing was oddly accurate. Sharp-beaked, well, a hippogriff's beak is sharp enough. Lynn grinned, having more or less guessed the truth. Malfoy snorted and fell silent. He had planned on writing to his father as soon as he got back to the dormitory, inflaming the story of a dangerous student-attacking monster and urging him to use his influence, preferably to get Hagrid fired. Now Lynn's casual defense of Buckbeak made him hesitate. Maybe, Malfoy thought, this injury wasn't entirely useless if it gave him an excuse to talk to Lynn. Lunchtime was long, and a friendly conversation sounded much preferable right now. 143. I am irreconcilable with gambling and drugs. The afternoon sun spilled lazily over the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where a cluster of students had already gathered near Hagrid's hut. Third-year Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws, taking the Care of Magical Creatures elective, chatted in small groups, casting curious glances around. Lynn arrived with his trunk, flanked by Edgar and Ollie. They were already planning where to set up the hot pot after class. Good afternoon, Professor Hagrid, Lynn called out first. Hagrid had looked a little sullen all morning. Dumbledore had suggested he shouldn't lecture on anything slightly exciting, but the moment someone called him Professor, his face brightened and his eyes crinkled into slits. Good afternoon to you too, Lynn, Edgar, and Ollie. Where's William? William chose ancient runes and arithmancy, so there was a scheduling conflict. Edgar explained. He told us to apologize for him. He's really sorry he couldn't make it. Hagrid waved his hand dismissively. Oh, no matter. No matter. It's an elective. Study what you like. He seemed genuinely pleased someone had thought of him. All right, everyone. Hagrid straightened and clapped his hands. Time to start the lesson. Follow me and mind your step. He led them across a small patch of grass to a relatively open, level clearing behind the hut. Haystacks were piled at the edge, and in the center sat a stout oak barrel. Even from a distance, some of the students wrinkled their noses. Do you smell that? A Ravenclaw girl asked, sniffing. The Hufflepuff beside her nodded uncertainly. It's like alcohol, but stronger, more pungent. Lynn needed only a look at the barrel to guess who was inside. Edgar nudged him. I'll bet it's Anya in there, and Hagrid used alcohol to coax her out as a teaching aid. Ollie nodded. Lynn shook his head with mock solemnity. I won't bet. I, Lynn, am irreconcilable with gambling and drugs. You shouldn't pick up bad habits either. Hagrid ambled over and patted the barrel, drawing everyone's attention. Everyone, look here. Inside this is the magical creature we're getting to know today. He cleared his throat, excitement coloring his voice. This is a very beautiful, rare creature that symbolizes purity and nobility. They live deep in the forest, and adults possess powerful magic. He wrapped the barrel's lid. Anya, stop sleeping. It's time for class. Let everyone see you. There was no answer. Hagrid frowned, then tugged the lid off and peered in. At the bottom of the barrel, Anya was dozing, emitting soft snores and a strong scent of alcohol. Hagrid gave the side of the barrel a bellowing shout. Anya, it's class time. The sun's on your backside. Anya shot awake. The barrel splintered under the force of her exit. Bang! Crash! And she burst through, hurtling forward like a launched projectile. Wingardium Leviosa, someone shouted. A precise levitation charm hit Anya mid-charge. Her hooves left the ground, and she floated half a meter in the air, wobbling helplessly, despite frantic kicks. Put me down. I'll fight you. Do you know who I am? Lynn? She sputtered as her gaze fixed on him. She turned her head away, a little embarrassed. Put me down. Lynn suppressed a smile and flicked his wand to lower her gently. Hagrid breathed out loud, wiping his brow. Haha, she's a bit overexcited today. All right, let's officially welcome Anya, a female unicorn. Hagrid launched into his lesson. He talked and gestured, explaining the unicorn's habits, characteristics, rarity, and how to behave around them. Respect, distance, and caution. The students listened keenly, especially at the warnings. Unicorn blood could sustain life, but was cursed, while tail hair and horn were powerful magical materials. A few bold Hufflepuff girls raised their hands. Professor Hagrid, can we touch Anya? Just a little? Not a chance, Hagrid rattled his head. No, absolutely not. Unicorns only allow certain pure females they find pleasing to approach them, and then it depends on their mood. For fairness and everyone's safety, no one touches her today. Just look. Look is enough. Anya paced elegantly to one side, glancing at the students from time to time. As class wound down and students packed up, Hagrid wrapped things up with a final summary. Lynn drifted behind Anya and slipped a small crystal bottle, corked and tucked in his robes, into his hand. It was a high-proof liquor he'd brewed himself from grain grown with abundance and a few private techniques. Sharp, inviting. He shook the bottle and cracked the cork just enough for a sliver of aroma to escape. The scent found its way straight to Anya's nostrils. Her ears flicked up. She glanced toward Hagrid and the assembled students, then gave Lynn the faintest nod. Deal. Lynn tucked the bottle into a little hollow in the grass in front of her so she could get to it later. Then, with quick fingers, plucked a tuft of hair from the end of her tail. The shimmering tail hair fit in his palm, and he slipped it casually into his robe pocket. All right, that's all for today, Hagrid said. Remember to review what you learned about unicorns. Next week we might study. Well, we'll see next week. The students dispersed, but still chattered, reluctant to leave. Edgar shoved his monster book into his bag. Let's go. Where are we setting up the hot pot? Lynn hefted his trunk and considered. There were plenty of good camping spots around Hogwarts, but they needed one with scenery and some privacy. By the Black Lake, he decided. There's a small wood behind a gentle slope on the east bank. It's sheltered from the wind and overlooks the lake. We can set up a big tent and cook inside. Won't worry about wind or a drop in temperature. Perfect, Edgar agreed. Ollie nodded. William must be out of class too, Edgar said, pulling out his phone. I'll call him and tell him to come straight over. Sure, let him head straight here, Lynn said. He mentally ran through what was in his trunk. Fresh vegetables, assorted meats and meatballs, several soup bases he'd mixed, dipping sauces, drinks. Maybe they were missing dessert. He might make something on the spot. Edgar finished the call. Hello, William? You out of class? Good. We're behind the small wood on the east bank of the Black Lake, the one with the crooked neck beach. See you there. He hung up. Excellent. I'll go try fishing, add something fresh to the meal. Chapter 144. At the most vulnerable time. At night, Hogwarts shed the bustle of daytime and revealed a quiet, solemn beauty. Lynn set a small folding chair outside the tent and sat staring at the brilliantly lit castle across the lake. It's been over 2 years since I first came to Hogwarts, he sighed, feeling the strange swiftness of time since he'd stepped into the world of magic. So this is why you're sitting by the lake lamenting life, Master, and haven't caught a single fish. Dudu's voice floated over from the side. The house elf had also brought a little stool and a sturdy, simple fishing rod. Just as he spoke, the float bobbed, sank, and with a practiced flick, Dudu hauled a plump trout out of the water. Lynn glanced at the catch and then at his own empty basket. Without changing his expression, he declared with mock gravity, "Whatever you catch is what I catch, right? My gear, my bait. Thus I caught this fish. Perfect logic." Dudu dumped the trout into the bucket with a splash. Dudu cannot refute Master's logic. After all, you are Master. Lynn snorted and rose, stretching. The scent of hot pot from the tent made his stomach grumble. Let's go. Time to eat. Clean the fish. We'll grill them tomorrow. Inside the roomy tent, delicious aromas filled the air. In the center of the camp lay a special 3-compartment copper pot, simmering 3 different broths, red, gold, and white. Lynn favored spice, so one compartment brimmed with a fiery beef tallow base, chili oil floating and Sichuan peppercorns, perfume filling the air. Edgar liked sweet and savory, so a rich tomato base steamed beside it, tangy and mouthwatering. William preferred something light, so a mushroom broth, milky and mellow, occupied the third. Ollie, who was easygoing about everything, hovered with long chopsticks, dithering about which meat to cook first. Lynn, we were waiting for you. Hurry, the meat's almost all been sneakily eaten by Edgar. William's glasses fogged with steam. Nonsense. I'm just testing whether it's cooked, Edgar mumbled with his mouth full. They ate heartily. Fresh ingredients plunged into boiling broth and into sauces. Every bite was pure satisfaction. Afterwards, they slumped into camping chairs, rubbing full bellies. Are we going back tonight? Edgar asked sleepily after a loud belch. Lynn looked at the landscape outside and decided, we're already out here. If we don't spend a night under the stars and see Hogwarts at night, what's the point of this trip? The tent's big and warm. We're staying. Everyone agreed, and after a quick cleanup, the 4 lay side by side in the tent. In the middle of the night, Lynn frowned in his sleep. He dreamed he had lost his way in Hogwarts corridors, desperately searching for a bathroom until he finally found a familiar door. He rushed forward, yanked the handle, and then realized he was dreaming. The realization jolted him awake. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, as if something pinned him down. By the faint glow of the tent's nightlight, he saw why. Edgar had managed an enormous, unrefined sprawl, occupying the middle of their sleeping line. His head rested on William's stomach, one leg flung over Ollie, the other was pressed flat against Lynn's chest. No wonder he couldn't move. Lynn drew his wand and, with a silent jolt, lifted the sleeping Edgar. A small wand wave transported him gently to a corner where luggage was piled, and the snoring mass was set down with minimal fuss. Problem solved. Lynn dashed from the tent, only to find a sudden heavy rain drumming the canvas and thunder punctuating the night. He squinted into the dark and spotted a thick clump of bushes not far off, with a small earthen rise behind them, a secluded spot exactly where someone would go in urgent need. I can't worry about manners now, he muttered, fumbling at the elastic of his pajama pants. At the most vulnerable moment, his stomach twisted shut. He braced to hold it. Then something hit the ground where he'd just been standing. He shot into the air like a cannonball from a springing bed, and a massive shadow slammed into the thicket with a dull, earth-shaking thud. Holy, he gasped. Lynn brought his wand down and peered through the rain. The creature was enormous, almost rhinoceros-sized, but its skin was gray-purple, thick and warted, layered with horn-like ridges. Two enormous curved horns crowned its head, sharp and menacing. The sight clicked in his head instantly. An erumpent? He breathed. He knew the beasts from Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. Highly dangerous, thick-skinned, foul-tempered, territorial. Usually they lurked in remote European hills. How had one wandered onto Hogwarts grounds? Was it something Hagrid had raised and lost? A ping cut through his thoughts. Ding! Mission issued. Description. A young erumpent has accidentally strayed. It is confused and irritable in the heavy rain and needs a warm place to stay. As a helpful wizard, please assist it in finding its destination. Reward, erumpent charge. Ability to launch an unstoppable straight-line charge that smashes through rock and walls, dealing massive damage and causing forced knockback. Note, the original home is not specified. Wink. Lynn sighed theatrically and pointed his wand at the beast, suddenly adopting a soothing tone. Look, little horn brother, no scolding, but you're grown. You shouldn't be wandering around at night getting lost. It's dangerous. You'll trample plants, or worse, you might scare a wizard. No offense. The erumpent growled low, pounding the ground with its hind hooves. It lowered its head, aiming its horns straight at Lynn, ready to charge again. Now, don't be hasty. Lynn waved his wand with a practiced calm. You're scared and wet from the rain. You just want somewhere warm and safe. Don't worry. I, Lynn, am the warmest-hearted. I'll prepare you a comfortable, all-inclusive forever home so you never get lost again. The tip of his wand pulsed with light, trained on the massive beast that was pawing the muddy earth and about to lunge. Erumpent, about to charge. Lynn's lips curved. Flipendo. 145, the birth of the iron butt. The erumpent was about to push off and launch itself when Lynn's knockback jinx struck it squarely. It didn't do much damage, but it made the creature stumble and ruined its charge. The beast shook its head, steam puffing from its nostrils, eyes fixed on Lynn, who hovered above it. Moo roar! That was just a mistake. I should have jumped higher and faster, it thought angrily. It bent its knees again, muscles bulging, preparing for a third run-up. There was no way it would miss this flying insect. Lynn watched the persistent monster from the air and felt a little baffled. This erumpent, why did it seem so dim? Moo roar! Come down here. If you've got the guts, don't fly. The erumpent roared at the sky. Its voice shook the surroundings, full of provocation. Lynn was certain now, this one really wasn't very bright. He shouted back, if you've got the ability, come up here. Jump higher. Moo roar, you wait. The erumpent's anger spiked. Its hind hooves gouged two deep pits in the earth, and then it exploded upward with all its strength. This time it jumped higher than before, and at a trickier angle. Its two great horns gleamed, determined to skewer Lynn. At the very apex of its leap, when old momentum had died down and new force had not yet formed, making it hard to change course, Lynn's figure blurred, and he slipped to the erumpent's side and rear. Now, a silver light blinked as Hand of Thunder summoning was unleashed. Lynn didn't call down a huge thundercloud. The noise would be too conspicuous. He concentrated the charge at the tip of his wand. It flared with blue-white light. Electric snakes coiled and crackled around it. Without hesitation, he aimed at the erumpent's most vulnerable rear. You like to launch sneak attacks while others are in the bathroom, don't you? Lynn barked as he fired. You like to headbutt people, right? Try headbutting again and let me see. Taste this. Lightning chrysanthemum sting. Crackle. Sizzle. A thin blue-white bolt of lightning, painfully precise and paralyzing, struck the erumpent's vital spot. More branching bolts followed, repeatedly electrifying the same area. The creature's massive body stiffened in midair and then went rigid. Its eyes bulged with sudden, unimaginable pain and paralysis. Luckily, it was raining over Hogwarts, and distant thunder rolled through the sky. Lynn's artificial lightning made a lot of noise, but under the cover of the storm it didn't seem out of place, at most like a close bolt had struck the edge of the forbidden forest. Still, the erumpent's resistance was ridiculous. After taking concentrated lightning from Lynn's wand, the sort strong enough to char a group of Grindylows, struck repeatedly on such a fragile place, it didn't even scream. The creature's defenses were insane. Lynn, alternating a few angles to spread the shocks, couldn't help clicking his tongue in admiration. If he could skin this thing, craft full-body armor from it, and add defensive enchantments, wouldn't he be able to stand unscathed in a wizard duel? With that thought, his gaze grew more fervent. He kept the lightning flowing. "I'll keep striking. Let's see how long you can hold out." For the erumpent, the feeling was beyond mere pain. A mix of soreness, numbness, aching, and itching surged from its tailbone up the spine and into every limb. The electric energy crawled through its tough but not insulating hide. It felt like 10,000 electric bees attacking its most sensitive place, or like being stuck inside the furnace of a living lightning lord. It wanted to roar, beg for mercy, scream at the sky to stop, but its jaw and tongue were paralyzed and could only manage weak, airy sounds. This couldn't continue. If it did, the creature would lose everything, its dignity, maybe its life. Survival instinct overrode everything. It summoned the last of its strength to force its mouth to obey. Finally, as another gentle bolt brushed its rear, the erumpent croaked, "Moo! Stop!" The plea was thin and full of desperation. Its eyes rolled back, the twitching stopped, and it collapsed to the ground. Lynn. Half an hour later, inside the trunk in the simulated hill and valley area, the erumpent stirred. Its mind, muddled from the shock, slowly cleared. Pain and soreness were everywhere, especially that unspeakable burning place. It blinked open heavy lids and found a face close to its own. "Moo roar! Help!" it bellowed, panic making its four hooves flail as it tried to roll away. Lynn was startled by the scream and snapped. "Why are you yelling so loud? Didn't I just, well, almost, zap you to death? Is that reaction necessary?" Moo roar, help, stop zapping, I'm going to die." The erumpent kept wailing, feeling as if it had escaped one storm only to fall into a mouth of lightning. Lynn's head throbbed from the noise. Just as he was about to give it another firm reminder, he slapped his forehead. "Oh, I forgot to turn on affinity. Look at the mess I made." The erumpent, braced for a desperate fight, froze. The aura of the two-legged creature before it had changed. Suddenly, it felt oddly friendly. That new closeness clashed with the terrifying memory of electricity striking its butt, leaving the erumpent bewildered. "My butt tells me to stay away," its instincts murmured, but something else pulled it closer. Lynn cleared his throat and smiled, a smile that, to the erumpent, seemed to make that sore spot ache all over again. "Now, can you quiet down and listen to me?" The erumpent hesitated, then nodded. It was still scared of the lightning. "Very good," Lynn said. "First question. How did you end up near Hogwarts? This isn't exactly your species' usual habitat." The erumpent began to recount its long, ridiculous pilgrimage. It had lived in a remote hill in southwest Britain, content in its small territory, until a few days ago, when several wizards on fiery red brooms had flown over. The roar like an engine made it furious. It felt violated and chased those broom trails all the way. It followed a sparsely populated route across mountains, ridges, rivers, and marshes. With amazing stamina and a single-minded obsession to headbutt those guys, it chased from the southwest peninsula to the vicinity of Hogwarts in the Scottish Highlands, a straight-line distance of more than 600 kilometers. Along the way, it had managed to avoid major Muggle towns and wizard settlements, which was the only saving grace. Lynn fell silent as he listened. His earlier assessment that the creature was a bit slow suddenly seemed far too polite. This wasn't merely slow. This was spectacularly, impressively foolish. If you called it clever, it had the extraordinary persistence to chase broom riders for over 600 kilometers for the sake of a grudge. If you called it stupid, it at least knew to pick remote routes and not cause a large-scale disturbance. "So, can you let me go?" the erumpent pleaded. "I promise to go back right away and never chase things in the sky again." The creature seemed to think the two-legged being was terrifying but reasonable. Lynn said nothing. He raised his wand. Blue-white sparks jumped at the tip, and the erumpent's rear muscles twitched involuntarily. The beast froze. "Moo roar! Moo roar! Moo roar! Wait! Spare my butt. I think the environment here is actually quite nice. This could be the new home I've been looking for. Please take me in." Seeing the desperation on the erumpent's face and its earnest agreement to comply, Lynn sighed with satisfaction and eased his wand back down. Ding! Task completed. Reward issued. "Welcome home, Iron Butt. From now on, this is your home. Remember to follow the residence rules. Rule number 1, no sneak attacks while others are in the bathroom. The erumpent nodded like a pounding pestle. Moo, guaranteed, it replied, though inwardly thinking, who would dare? Brothers, Happy New Year. Having just climbed out of the trunk, Lynn breathed in the cool, earthy air, scented with lake water and rain. He'd tossed and turned half the night after persuading a silly erumpent, and sleep was nowhere to be found. He looked at the black lake, dark as ink but hammered by raindrops. They say rainy days are fishing days, he muttered. The surface was restless, high-dissolved oxygen, active fish. Lynn squared his shoulders. I, Lynn, will break this blanked curse today. If neither day nor night worked, surely a rainy day can't fail me. No sooner thought than done. He picked up the battered fishing rod that had seen him through many defeats, checked the line and bait, and tiptoed out of the tent where faint snoring came from his 3 roommates. He picked a flat spot on the shore with decent depth and tapped it with his wand. Transfigure! Stones and wet branches shifted, twisted, and folded together, rising into a sturdy makeshift shelter with a sloping roof that stretched just above the water. With another flick, Lynn turned a large rock into a cushioned armchair. He settled in, set his posture, cast his line, and sent the fluorescent bait into the rain-blurred lake. He propped the rod on a stand, crossed his arms, and settled into the slow patience of fishing. Rain drummed steadily on the shelter. Lynn half closed his eyes and let the quiet drag his mind toward sleep. Pitter-patter, splash-splash. Minutes ticked by. The rod did not twitch. His eyelids drooped and his focus thinned, just as his head began to nod. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a faint light moving fast toward the tent. It was dim, as if muffled, but stark against the black, rainy night. Lynn's drowsiness vanished. Remembering the earlier sneak attack by the iron butt, his heart leapt. Whoever it was, approaching their tent in the middle of the night, was not there to be friendly. Instinct took over. His wand slid out of his sleeve, and he aimed at the approaching glow. Torrential impact. This time, he didn't merely call water. Fine blue-white arcs leapt and tangled through a thick, surging jet, crackling like living things. The rain barely masked the sound. The high-pressure column, braided with a paralyzing current, tore through the downpour and struck the intruders like a water mine. Splash! The impact knocked them flat, mud flew. Worse, the electrical arcs racing over them sizzled and popped. 2 high-pitched screams cut through the rain. Lynn apparated to the tent's entrance the instant he'd cast, and he was at the scene the next second. The screams sounded oddly familiar. He hurried closer. 2 red-haired boys in Gryffindor robes lay sprawled on the mud, hair standing on end and still smoking in places. Their faces were splattered, their limbs twitching from the shock. Each clutched a rectangular object that crackled faintly with sparks. Fred? George? Lynn's voice rose in disbelief. The twins blinked up at him, bewildered. Lynn? They answered in unison, voices still trembling. Back in the tent, a fire had been relit to dry and warm everyone. Lynn, a roused Ollie, William, and a bleary-eyed Edgar sat together. Opposite them, Fred and George sagged on stools, their robes dried but their hair still occasionally spitting sparks. They looked half aggrieved, half humiliated, which made the whole scene oddly comical. So, Lynn said, trying to keep his tone level, you 2 snuck out in the rain because you saw our names on that map of yours and thought you'd join our little camping party? Fred and George nodded in perfect synchronization, their frizzed hair adding to the picture of dishevelment. But why didn't we see your name? Fred asked. Lynn almost wanted to boast about a cheat, but instead said, maybe the map's old. Things go wrong with enchanted objects sometimes. Brilliant deduction, Lynn, George crowed. We thought it'd be hilarious to see Hufflepuffs camping by the lake instead of in their dorms. Beats listening to Percy ramble in the common room, at least. Fred sighed and pulled the rectangular device from his pocket. Its surface was a mess of smudged runes and sputtering sparks. Our explorer's guide is ruined. It's not just old. Something fried it. Clearly, Lynn's electrified torrential impact had not only soaked the twins, but also thoroughly shorted their magical map. He looked at the sizzling artifact, a corner of his mouth twitching. Leave it with me. I'll see if I can fix it. I'll return it when it's working. George shrugged. No rush. We could navigate Hogwarts blindfolded by now. We've memorized every secret passage on that thing. Fred added with a sly grin. It's just that without the map to get past Filch and the roaming professors at night, we'll have to use our wits a bit more. They laughed at themselves, the tension easing. After a cup of hot chocolate and a bit more banter, the twins prepared to leave, having intended to cause a stir, only to become the show themselves, bedraggled and crackling. Once they'd gone, quiet fell over the tent. Edgar yawned and fell asleep at once. William and Ollie exchanged a look and padded back to their rest. Lynn walked to the tent opening and watched the rain. His rod stood motionless under the shelter by the lake. Between the erumpent, the late-night intruders, and the unexpected fireworks, tonight had been oddly eventful. The urge to fish was gone. He sighed, packed up the rod, and muttered to himself, "This doesn't count as being blanked. I just don't want to fish anymore." Hold and pinch. Hold and pinch. Slap! The sharp sound of a hand smacking fabric cut through the quiet of the tent in the early morning. Immediately afterward, Edgar's anxious yell, "Lynn, wake up! Get up! We're going to be late for Defense Against the Dark Arts." The slap and the shout snapped Lynn awake. He fumbled for his phone on the pillow and squinted at the screen. Holy crap! They really were about to be late. Quick, 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 let's go. Lynn scrambled into his robes. Washing, breakfast, textbooks, none of that mattered. The four of them grabbed their wands and bolted out of the tent, sprinting toward the castle. They cut across the courtyard and raced up flight after flight of stairs, panting. Since the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor changed every year, the classroom's location wasn't fixed. Last year, Lockhart had picked a lavish room with walls covered in his smiling portraits. This year, Professor Lupin clearly needed no such flair. He'd chosen a plain, empty classroom. By the time Lynn and the others burst in, breathless, the room was almost full. Lupin had just set a very battered leather trunk beside the podium. He looked up as the four hurried in, and instead of scolding them, smiled with understanding and gave a small nod, indicating they should find seats quickly. Feeling as if they'd been pardoned, the four slid into the few remaining chairs. Lupin clapped his hands to quiet the room. "Good morning, class. I'm Remus Lupin, your Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher this year." He introduced himself plainly. Any comparison would have only hurt. "I believe some of you prepared rather thoroughly, and may even have learned through certain channels what our first lesson will be." A low murmur went around the room. Edgar grinned proudly at that, earning 3 questioning looks from Lynn, Ollie, and William. The smile froze on Edgar's face. "I forgot. I really forgot." Lupin ignored the small commotion and continued. "Today, we're going to identify and learn about a creature called a boggart. A boggart is a magical creature that likes to hide in dark, enclosed places, an old wardrobe at home, under a bed, a trunk in an abandoned attic," he explained, and a few students instinctively drew in their necks. The interesting thing is no one has ever seen a boggart's true form. When it appears to a person, it reads that person's deepest fear and instantly transforms into whatever scares them most. The classroom fell silent, a mix of curiosity and dread in the air. "But dealing with a boggart doesn't require powerful magic," Lupin went on. "On the contrary, it fears laughter, joy, the power of making it look ridiculous. We need only a simple spell." He drew his wand and flicked it. "The incantation is ridiculous. When you cast it, you must clearly imagine the thing you fear turning into something hilarious. The more specific, the better. Now, everyone take out your wands and practice with me. Ridiculous. Ridiculous." One by one, the students raised their wands and mimicked his motion. Lupin walked the room, correcting pronunciations and gestures. When he judged them competent, he returned to the trunk. "Theory will only get us so far. Time for practice." He scanned the room. "Who would like to go first, to face a real boggart and try the spell?" Whispers rippled through the class. Some hands tentatively went up. Lupin needed someone to set a good example. His eyes landed on the back row, where the 4 latecomers sat. He figured that since they'd already learned the Patronus charm, a boggart should be easy enough. "Mr. Burns," he called, "I saw you practicing earlier. Would you like to go first and show everyone how it's done?" Edgar sprang up. "Of course, Professor." He strode to the front. Lupin stood to the side of the trunk, hand on the lid. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Concentrate. Imagine it becoming ridiculous." Edgar drew a deep breath and nodded vigorously. Ready, Professor. Let's do it. Good. Lupin flung the lid open. At the front of the classroom, an appalling sight appeared. A humanoid figure in tattered black robes hunched over the neck of a unicorn. Anya's mane was dust-streaked, her eyes half closed with pain, and the robed figure leaned in, greedily sucking blood from the unicorn's neck. Everyone froze. Lynn and Lupin were on the verge of intervening. Lupin hadn't expected Edgar's deepest fear to be this. Where could Edgar have seen something like this? Edgar went pale as if struck. His hand holding the wand trembled. Of course he was terrified. He and William had witnessed that scene in person. The hooded figure seemed to notice Edgar and slowly looked up. The shadow in the hood hid the face. Only 2 points of crimson light flickered in the darkness. Avada! Ridiculous! Edgar reacted just in time, almost letting the class witness the killing curse. With a pop, the robed figure transformed into a ridiculous sight, an enormous pair of pajamas covered in tacky pink leprechaun patterns trimmed with lace. The wand became a squeaky toy baton that made silly noises on its own. The 2 pinprick lights under the hood turned into gaudy red bulbs, flashing the words, "Kiss Me." The figure began to dance a clumsy, off-key version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, accompanied by electronic beep-beep-da-da sound effects. Someone snorted, then no one could hold it in. Laughter exploded through the classroom. Ha-ha! Ridden by mirth, the boggart made a soft pop, quickly shriveled, and slunk back into the leather trunk, which snapped shut on its own. Lupin stepped forward and patted Edgar on the shoulder. Very good demonstration. 10 points to Gryffindor. Oh, sorry, 10 points to Hufflepuff. He turned to the class. Who's next? Who wants to try? Me. Pick me, Professor. I'll go. A forest of hands shot up. Lupin hesitated at the enthusiasm, then decided to draw lots. Luck wasn't often on Lynn's side, judging by his fishing, but William's number came up near the front. Are you ready? Lupin asked. William nodded clearly. Ready, Professor. Very well. Lupin opened the lid again. An enormous emerald green basilisk materialized, a monstrous image conjured by the boggart. Lupin. 148. To pass oneself off as someone else. Fortunately, William stayed calm. After Lupin's ridiculous turned the boggart that had been acting as a jail into an oversized plush snake that only knew how to slither against legs and look cute, the creature hurried back into the trunk. A few curious students stepped forward to try their turns. When Lupin encouraged the next volunteer and went to lift the lid, a strong resistance came from inside. The trunk wouldn't open. Lupin tapped it and called, "Come on out." The lid didn't budge, not even an inch. From inside, the boggart might as well have been shouting. Are you kidding me? I get transformed the moment I show myself. I'm done with this. Lupin glanced at the eager faces in the class and felt a little embarrassed. Had the boggart gone on strike? It seems the boggart is a bit tired, he said. We'll end the practical session here. Everyone did very well. The first step in overcoming fear is always the hardest. You'll meet other magical creatures in later lessons. He walked back to the lectern, moved the battered trunk to a corner, and opened his textbook. Now, please turn to page 25 of The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection. Today we'll learn about another small nuisance-type dark creature you might find in houses or ancient buildings, the red cap. Their characteristics are: Edgar, Ollie, and William froze on the words, turned to page 25, and shot each other horrified looks. Their textbooks were still back in the dormitory. All three turned to Lynn beside them. Calmly, he reached into his dark robe, fumbled for a second, and produced a map with irregular burn marks across it. He spread it on his desk with a serious expression and even pointed at an area as if studying the illustrations on page 25. He hadn't brought the book, but at least his attitude toward learning was correct. He'd prepared reference materials. Edgar and the others stared, halfway between wanting to laugh and not daring to. They lowered their heads. Their shoulders shook with suppressed amusement. On the platform, Lupin was explaining Redcap's habits, dangers, and repellents. At a key point, he paused and scanned the classroom to make sure everyone was listening and taking notes. His eyes landed on the empty desks in front of Edgar, Ollie, and William. No textbooks. Lupin's brow tightened slightly. They had arrived in a rush this morning, so it might be excusable. He intended to remind them after class. Then his gaze moved to Lynn. Something was spread out in front of him, but it was certainly not the dark forces. It looked like a piece of parchment, badly scorched. Was the student faking it? Lupin had seen a few tricks in his time, but using a charred scrap to pretend it was a textbook was brazen. He set the book down and walked down from the platform, threading between the desks straight to Lynn's seat. He meant to remind this shortcut-taking pupil about proper preparation. Lynn, silently chanting, "You can't see me, you can't see me," in his head, felt a shadow fall over him. He looked up to meet Lupin's eyes. "Mr. Lynn," Lupin said quietly, "may I see the material you are studying?" Panic jumped in Lynn's chest. He'd been caught. Professor, let me explain," he stammered and handed over the charred Marauder's map. Lupin took it. The instant his gaze fell on the parchment, he stiffened a fraction. He brought it closer, studying the faint, scorched tracings and the corner annotations that, despite the damage, were still faintly legible. He breathed in sharply. Merlin, the Marauder's map. The notorious creation of Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, once used for midnight adventures, pranks, and avoiding Snape. How had it come to this? Burned, damaged, its enchantments nearly asleep. Who had done this? Should he confiscate it? Seeing Lupin's expression, Lynn inwardly shrieked, "Not confiscate. It belongs to Fred and George. I promise to fix it and return it." Professor," he blurted, urgent and sincere, "this map isn't mine. I borrowed it from 2 friends to study. It got damaged accidentally. I promised to repair it and give it back in one piece." Lupin looked at the map for a long moment, then at Lynn. He didn't ask about who had done it or how Lynn had come by it. He sighed and handed the parchment back. "In class, you should listen attentively and use the correct textbook, Mr. Lynn," he said quietly. Hufflepuff. Never mind. Don't let it happen again. For now, share a textbook with the student next to you. Relief flooded Lynn. He slipped the map back into his robe and arranged to borrow a book. The next morning in the Great Hall, Lynn spotted 2 conspicuously red heads at the Gryffindor table, Fred and George, flanking Ron. One twin was making a strip of bacon behave like a broomstick with a fork. The other was attempting to smear marmalade onto Ron's Quidditch strategy and tactics, earning annoyed protest from Ron. Lynn sat opposite the twins and pushed the repaired map toward them. The moment Fred and George saw it, their faces lit up. "Merlin's fattest underpants!" Fred exclaimed, grabbing the map and smoothing its surface over and over. "You fixed it! You actually fixed it! Mate, you're fast," Fred said, clapping Lynn on the shoulder. "We thought we'd be waiting weeks, maybe months, to celebrate the map's recovery." "We've decided," George interrupted. They slipped an arm around each side of Lynn and lowered their voices in unison. "We're taking you on a night expedition." Lynn blinked. "Tempted?" Fred winked. Lynn had nothing better to do. "Sure. Time, place?" Fred and George exchanged a conspiratorial look. "Tonight, after curfew. 8th floor. The tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy being clubbed by trolls. See you there." 149. I misunderstood Snape. As dusk settled, the torches and candles along the castle corridors winked to life. Only Filch patrolling and the distant mew of Madame Norris punctuated the hush. Lynn arrived on the 8th floor, outside the room of requirement, right on schedule. Light footsteps sounded from the corner of the corridor. 2 identical heads poked out, one above the other, peering at him. "See, George, I told you Lynn would be here." Fred's grin was smug. "Huh, I said that first, Fred," George shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, whatever, doesn't matter. We both thought the same thing." "True, after all, we're one person split in 2. They stepped out like a practiced double act. "Right on time, Lynn," Fred clapped him on the shoulder. "Welcome to the first special guest experience of the Midnight Marauders Club." George made an exaggerated bow. "Where are we going?" Lynn asked, a hint of interest in his voice. The twins exchanged a look. Fred rubbed his chin. The Forbidden Forest is too obvious. You're probably more familiar with that place than both of us combined," he added, nodding at Lynn. "After all, the first time we met you was there. You even thrashed us." George chuckled. "Yeah, the forest is practically your backyard. We're taking you to see the real inner workings of Hogwarts, its veins and guts, the secret passageways hidden in the stones." "You mean the secret passages?" Lynn guessed. "Exactly." Fred grinned. "We'll start with the practical one, the secret passage to Hogsmeade. You'll get to smell Honeyduke's sweets early, no waiting for the weekend." Lynn shrugged. Fine, I'll follow the club's decision. They slipped past creaky suits of armor and a tattletale portrait, down dim corridors and winding stairs, and finally out through a small side door. The night sky was dusted with stars. When Lynn saw an old familiar tree by the castle again, he blinked. There's a secret passage here? The last 2 times Lynn had been near the willow, he'd encountered the immobile flying car and then helped the twins fix it, never noticed any passage. Surprising, isn't it? Fred said. We wanted to take you through this when you fixed the car as a thank you, but you know what happened. George added, but it's not too late. This one goes straight to the shrieking shack. Very handy. They set to work. George found a sturdy stick. Fred took it, held his breath, and jabbed at a knot in the trunk of the humping willow. The tree, which had been swaying a moment before, froze. Its wildly swinging branches slowly hung down, submissive. The 3 slipped through the curtain of leaves and crouched beneath the trunk. Where roots and weeds had been, a black tunnel mouth yawned. Lynn stared at the barely concealed entrance and felt foolish for not noticing before. They went in, one by one. The passage was roomier than expected. Rough earthen walls threaded with roots, the slow drip of water, an uneven floor. The twins kept up a running commentary on the passage's history as they went. It wound down, and the air grew cooler and damper. After a few minutes, as they guessed they might be under the school boundary, a violent, penetrating stench hit them from ahead. It was a multi-layered, assaulting odor, rotten eggs left to ferment next to a tin of surströmming and lutefisk, marsh gas, and the acid tang of a laboratory explosion. The scent struck straight at the top of the skull. Blur! Cough, cough, blur! Fred and George were blindsided. Their faces went green, stomachs roiling. They leaned against the wall, retching, wand light jittering. Go, go! Retreat! Fred managed, almost in tears. Who is so unhygienic? What was left in this passage? Did something die in here? George, gagging, shouted, Change passages! We can't use this one. It's going to kill us! They both turned to flee. Lynn felt his knees go weak as the first hint of the smell hit, yet it tugged at an odd familiarity. He dredged up the memory of his own masterpiece from potions class and had time for one thought before acting. He flicked his wand. 3 transparent bubbles enveloped their heads, filtering the air. They still couldn't get rid of the phantom aftertaste of the scent, but at least it was breathable. Phew, I'm alive, Fred gasped, staring ahead in traumatized awe. That's the worst thing I've ever smelled, 100 times worse than Snape's shampoo. Even Dumbledore couldn't make a stench like that, George said, pale. This is phenomenal. Lynn's face, however, went oddly tight. He replayed the components of the smell in his head, surströmming, lutefisk, and the bitter sublimation from several magical additives he himself had used. There was no mistake. This was the exact smell of the special edition wolfsbane potion he'd made and, mortifyingly, given to Snape earlier. Holy! Lynn's chest tightened. He'd thought Snape had odd taste for foul potions, or maybe even some masochistic streak, but this wasn't a quirk. This was calculated. Snape had deliberately placed a version of the potion here as a booby trap to keep people out of the passage. Utterly devious. Lynn, snap out of it. Let's go. George tugged at his sleeve. Even wrapped in bubblehead charms, nobody wanted to linger in that gas chamber. Right. Lynn led the fast retreat. They hurried back, emerging through the hole beneath the humping willow and gulping the cool night air. Fred and George practically wept with relief. They took off their bubbles and inhaled as if reborn. Merlin, I never want to go to Hogsmeade again, at least not via that route, Fred moaned, collapsing. Agreed. Not even honeydukes can heal my nose, George said, staring at the stars in despair. Meanwhile, at the other end of the secret passage in the shrieking shack, Lupin was finishing repairs. A crystal bottle sat on the small wooden table in front of him. He'd intended only to check color and texture. He trusted Snape's skill in potions, but after all the things the 4 of them had done together, a little suspicion lingered. He thought he was prepared. Then a gust of molecules, concentrated, filthy, all the rot and malice of the world rolled into one, slammed into his nostrils. The werewolf's resilient composure dissolved. He went pale, pupils blown wide, bile churning in his stomach. He slammed the stopper back into the bottle, but the scent had already burrowed into his sinuses like a maggot in bone. He stumbled 2 steps away, hands over face, gray eyes wild with shock and a visceral physical disgust. Cough, cough, Merlin. He bent double, coughing dryly until his breath steadied, but his features stayed ashen. How had Snape managed to brew such an atrocious, weaponized scent? Had he added sewer sludge and troll toenails? Lupin cursed his curiosity for opening the bottle early. 150. Becoming a grandfather. Weekends at Hogwarts were always pleasant. For the third years, the pleasure peaked. Hogsmeade was finally open to them. At the castle gates on Saturday morning, students compared signed permission slips and argued over whether to hit Honeydukes or Zonkos first. Edgar, Ollie, and William checked their coin purses together. William hesitated as he looked at Lynn. "Lynn, your form," he began. They all knew Lynn had no family, no one to sign the guardian line. Lynn waved him off. "Ah, that, a minor inconvenience." Edgar patted his shoulder. "Don't worry, Lynn, we'll share whatever candy we buy. They say Honeyduke's new blood-flavored lollipops are intense." Ollie nodded. "Or we can bring you something back." "Thanks, but don't bother," Lynn said, checking his watch. "You guys go on ahead. Don't worry about me." They were skeptical, but Lynn's confident look persuaded them. They followed the crowd out of the castle toward Hogsmeade. The castle quieted behind them while Lynn made his way back to the dormitory at a leisurely pace. "Dudu, let's go. Destination, outskirts of Hogsmeade," he told the house elf. "Yes, master." Dudu set aside his work, took hold of the hem of Lynn's robe, and, just as any competent house elf could, performed a short-range apparition with precise coordinates. Crack! The two of them vanished, and in the next instant, they reappeared on a small track just outside the village. "All right," Lynn said. "You go back and handle the family business for now. Pick me up later if I need you." Dudu bowed and popped away. Lynn adjusted his robes and strolled toward the entrance of Hogsmeade. Soon he ran into Edgar, Ollie, and William coming down the main street. "Lynn," Edgar, sharp-eyed as always, spotted him first. "How did you? Weren't you? Oh, Dudu brought you, didn't he?" "You actually managed to think that through?" Lynn said. Edgar fell silent. Ollie and William, this being their first Hogsmeade visit, gaped at a village built entirely for witches and wizards. William already had a small notebook out to jot down interesting shops and items. They began at Honeyduke's, where the shelves and smells were overwhelming. Lynn wasn't much into sweets and bought nothing. In Zonko's, Edgar stocked up on prank props, dozens of Dr. Watt, Filibuster's fabulous wet start, no-heat fireworks, vowing to give Snape a surprise in potion class. Lynn raised an eyebrow. They browsed Gladrag's wizardware, where Lynn picked up the latest dragonhide gloves, and wandered through Dervish and Bang's for new magical gear. William was delighted by a peacock quill at Scrivenshafts that corrected spelling automatically and bought it on the spot. Ollie peered longingly at Madame Putafoot's tea shop but was too shy to go in. Edgar dragged them through almost every main street and famous shop until all four of them were carrying a respectable pile of purchases. "Let's do the owl post last," Edgar suggested. The post office was a building full of small windows, accompanied by hoots and the beat of wings. They reached the door and hadn't even pushed it open when, bang! The post office door flew wide from the inside. A disheveled middle-aged wizard in a post office uniform rushed out, broom flailing, shouting at the sky, "Come back, you lawless rogue bird!" A sturdy snowy owl circled above, nimbly dodging the man's futile swings and even turning to give a mocking squawk. Edgar, Ollie, and William froze, then all looked to Lynn. The lazy smile on Lynn's face vanished, his eyelid twitched. He narrowed his eyes at the mocking owl and swore under his breath, "Lao Ba! You damn bird! Get over here!" Hearing its name, the snowy owl made an elegant turn, dove, and landed on Lynn's outstretched arm. It tried to rub its head against his cheek. Lynn pushed it away with an exasperated palm. The post office employee came over, panting, and when he saw the owl on Lynn's arm, his face went beet red with anger. Are you the owner of this snowy owl?" he demanded. Lynn glanced at Laoba's innocent, wide-eyed expression, and then at the furious postman. He sighed. "Yes, sir. It's mine. What trouble has it caused?" "What trouble has it caused?" the man nearly shouted, trembling with outrage as he pointed at Laoba. This playboy, scoundrel, bird trash. It seduced our post office's most beautiful, gentle female snowy owl, and it left behind debts of passion. I have a nest of 7 newly hatched snowy owlets here. Their poor mother is hopelessly smitten. She won't let anyone but him near them to feed them. Lao Ba, perched placidly, seemed to preen with smug satisfaction. If birds could smug. Hey, little sister, follow me and you'll live like a queen. Look at my feathers, my bearing, my aura. My master is filthy rich. He has a shop in Diagon Alley and a fortune at home. Live with me and you and the chicks will eat fresh meatballs every meal and have the best nesting material. Lynn said nothing. People passing by had gathered and were pointing at the scene. Lynn felt his forehead throb. He had gone to Hogsmeade with a light bag and come away with an enormous problem. He had bought an oversized owl cage in the village. Inside, besides Lao Ba, were 8 snowy owls, a gentle-eyed adult female, and 7 fluffy, chirping chicks huddled together. He had also bought a mountain of supplies, large bags of soft nesting material, crates of special small meatballs made from fresh mouse meat and insects, owl nut feed, feeders and waterers, cleaning tools. Lynn, Edgar laughed, trying to suppress it as he patted Lynn's shoulder. Congratulations, you're a grandfather, 7 at once. Ollie peered at the chirping chicks. They're kind of adorable. Lynn shot Lao Ba a sharp look. Back at the castle, Lynn stowed the whole feathery brood in his trunk. The cacophony began immediately, a rising and falling hunger symphony. Hoot, hungry, one called. Hoot, hoot, hungry, hungry, another piped up. Hoot, 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 hungry, 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 chorused the littlest. Dudu stood by, silent and resigned. Lao Ba, go feed the kids, Lynn barked. Take care of your own chicks. What kind of bird are you if you sires them and then don't raise them, he scolded. Hurry up. Can't you see how hungry they are? Do you expect Master and Dudu to be your nannies every day? 151. Good news, bad news. October settled over Hogwarts, bringing a hush of autumn that made everything feel sleepier than usual. After Professor Binns's droning history of magic lecture that afternoon, most of the students filed out of the classroom, dazed and wobbly. One boy, however, shot upright and bolted from his seat with a swoosh before Binns had even finished his final sentence. Lynn, rubbing his eyes and only half awake, turned to William, who looked equally tired but at least conscious. Did he just remember he needs to be reincarnated, or is the castle on fire? He mumbled. William adjusted his glasses and yawned. Even he wasn't immune to the soporific effect of Binns. The Quidditch pitch is strangely free today, he said. Neither Slytherin nor Gryffindor are training this afternoon. Ravenclaw's seeker came off his broom yesterday and broke his arm, so they're out of commission. Some players still have classes, so teams don't have enough people to use the whole pitch. Edgar must have forced himself to stay awake during class. He chugged 2 bottles of stimulating potion and sat there wide-eyed just waiting for dismissal. He dashed off the moment Binns ended. Lynn laughed. It was a perfect storm. Right place, right time, right person. Edgar, breathless and determined, grabbed his polished broom and sprinted from the castle toward the pitch. When he arrived, the Hufflepuff team wasn't practicing. Instead, the players were huddled under the goalpost in a tight, miserable circle. Edgar skidded to a stop at the edge of the pitch. Cedric, what's going on? He asked, dread tightening his voice. Cedric looked up, his face a crumpled mask of upset. Edgar, our golden snitch is missing. The snitch? Edgar's voice shot up. The snitch wasn't just another piece of equipment. It was priceless. When did you notice? How? Have you searched the pitch, the changing rooms, the common room? A Hufflepuff beater nearby answered, shamefaced. We found out this morning when we were checking equipment. The snitch's box is here, and the lock isn't broken, but it's empty. We've searched everywhere, asked anyone who might have seen anything, no trace. It's like it flew away on its own. Edgar felt his stomach drop. Can you borrow one from another house? Ravenclaw probably isn't using theirs with their seeker injured. Or we asked, Cedric said miserably. Ravenclaw said theirs is in for maintenance. Gryffindor and Slytherin, you know how competitive they are. They won't lend one, especially Slytherin. We're lucky they haven't made fun of us about it yet. Edgar fell silent, thinking. Then his face lit up. The room of requirement. Lynn had taken him there before. If it could create a practice space, could it create a storeroom full of Quidditch gear, or even conjure a golden snitch? Wait here, he called, then turned and sprinted back toward the castle. I need a room with a golden snitch. He paced the corridor 3 times, and, as promised by legend, a door appeared. Edgar shoved it open and rushed in. The room was small and lined with shelves, but they held nothing living or useful. Instead, it was a cluttered display of snitch replicas, models, photos, drawings, even crude paper crafts, all glittering but none real. Edgar slapped his forehead. Had he not been specific enough? Maybe the room had taken his request too literally, a room showing golden snitches rather than a room that contains one. He stepped back out. The door vanished. "No, try again," he muttered. "A room for Quidditch equipment." A new door appeared. This time the space beyond was bigger, a kind of warehouse piled with old quaffles, ancient bludgers, and dusty brooms. He searched thoroughly but found no snitch. He swallowed his impatience and tried again. "I need a place that hides things, a place that could hold anything," Edgar told the wall. The next room that opened was not a room so much as a vast landscape of junk stretching out of sight. Mountains of discarded objects, broken furniture, piles of old books, rusted armor, shattered statues, tangled potion bottles, faded tapestries, and countless odd magical artifacts whose purpose was no longer obvious. It was a labyrinth of rubbish. Edgar mounted his broom and weaved through the maze, eyes darting from pile to pile. "What's this? Ooh, an old ring, all dull and missing its gems." He kicked aside a tangle of bric-a-brac. A pocket watch that ticks, but the hands just spin. 10 minutes passed as he rode through the maze, finding only dust and junk. Then a streak of gold zipped over his head. Edgar snapped his head up and saw a golden sphere flash through the air and dart into a mound of debris. "There!" he yelled. His reflexes were good enough. He lunged after the snitch and seized it, but catching it knocked him off balance. His center of gravity shifted, and he toppled sideways. Wah! He hit a heap of rubbish with a spectacular crash. He coughed and sputtered, choking on dust as he sat up. Fortunately, he hadn't been high off the ground, only a couple of meters, so the fall hadn't broken any bones. He clutched the snitch in his hand and checked it once, twice. It was intact. Then something hard jabbed painfully into his backside. He moved and peered down. The object staring back at him made him freeze. It was an exquisitely crafted diadem, its lines simple and elegant, set with a multitude of tiny gems. At its front sat a single, enormous sapphire, whose brilliance could not be dulled, even under the grime and dust. "You like to hide, huh? Just you wait. You like to hide, huh? Just you wait." Bang! The dormitory door slammed violently against the wall, bounced back, and let out a protesting groan. William, hunched over his desk studying the key points of history of magic, jumped. His quill dragged a long streak of ink across the page. He took a deep breath and slowly turned. His eyes landed coldly on the culprit at the door, Edgar. He was still in the posture of having just kicked the door open, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, cheeks flushed from exertion. Cradled in his arms was a Model 28 broomstick, grass clippings still clinging to its tail. Under William's stare, Edgar leaned the broom against the door, scratched his head sheepishly, and dropped his voice an octave. Hey, I'll be more careful next time. Really, William. The price of your excitement is my essay, and possibly the shortened life of this door, William said flatly. At that moment, Lynn crawled out of a trunk, looking a little ragged with bits of metal tangled in the ends of his hair. "Done training?" he asked casually as he stretched. "Yep." Edgar grabbed at the chance to change the subject. "Lynn, guess what our team lost during training today?" Lynn blinked. It wouldn't happen to be the golden snitch, would it?" "Merlin's beard. How did you know?" Lynn went quiet for 2 seconds, then turned and crawled back into the trunk. A few minutes later, he poked his head out again, dangling a dark, furry little creature by the scruff. The creature clutched a glittering gold ball with tiny, weakly fluttering wings, the golden snitch. Edgar's eyes went wide. His mouth formed a perfect O as he pointed at the niffler and the snitch, fingers trembling. It. "I was fishing by the Black Lake after class," Lynn said calmly. "Well, I didn't catch any fish, but I found this in the grass while I was packing." He shook the niffler. The little thing swayed, dizzy, but its claws tightened around the snitch and didn't let go. It watched Edgar warily and chittered indignantly, as if saying, "This is mine. Shiny." It tucked the snitch further under its belly. All right, Lynn said, poking the niffler's bulging belly. Give me the little gold ball, and I'll get you a bigger, shinier one later. I promise it'll be flashier than this." The Niffler's tiny eyes darted about, weighing the offer. Bigger? Shinier? It finally loosened its grip. Lynn pried open its claws, pulled out the snitch, and handed it to a stunned Edgar. "Here, return it to its owner. But speaking of which, how did you train without a snitch this afternoon?" Edgar took the snitch and let out a long, grateful sigh. "Don't remind me. I went to the room of requirement and muttered at the wall for ages. I found a snitch that looked a bit old, so we made do." He set the snitch carefully into a wooden box by his bedside and suddenly fumbled through his coat pockets. "Oh, while I was rummaging through that pile of junk in the room of requirement, I found this." He produced an object and held it out for Lynn to see, pride bright on his face. "How about that? Pretty nice, right? I found it in a corner. All dusty. Thought I'd bring it back and clean it up. Maybe it'll make a nice decoration." Lynn examined it. The ornament was crowned with a familiar curve. He lifted it and saw an inscription on the inside. "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure." Ravenclaw's motto. Could it be Ravenclaw's diadem? "Edgar, lend that to me for a few days," Lynn said. Edgar waved a hand. "Sure, I was just keeping it for fun anyway." "Thanks." Lynn nodded, took the diadem, and crawled back into the trunk. Inside, he produced a short, plump wizard whose face was pale with terror, one of Lynn's less willing test subjects. Gently, Lynn placed the diadem on the man's head. At first, nothing happened. The man stood there, expression hollow. Then the terror left his face. His features twitched strangely, and the corners of his mouth curled into a grotesque, eager smile. "Heh, heh, heh. Knowledge, beautiful, flowing all mine. More, I want more," he murmured. "Did I see that right?" Lynn thought and tried again. "Depulso." The diadem flew off the man's head. Terror rushed back into the man's face. "Don't kill me, I was wrong, I shouldn't— knowledge, it's all mine," he begged. Lynn repeated the test several times with the same result every time. He made a preliminary assessment aloud. The item was suspected to be Ravenclaw's diadem. Sinister, like Tom's diary, likely the product of the same dark craft. He paused. If it really was the diadem, destroying it would be a terrible waste. Should he burn it? Too risky. As he considered this, he said softly, "Wuan." The air on Lynn's shoulder rippled, and a warm, golden-red light appeared and faded in a breath. Wuan had arrived. "Master?" The bird tilted its head. Lynn stroked its feathers. "See if you can purify or weaken whatever evil is in that thing. Be careful. If it feels wrong, stop. Don't force it." "Okay, Master." Wuan sprang into the air, hovering above the diadem. This time its glow was not the flash of teleportation, but a soft, sacred radiance like the rhythm of life. It spread its wings and sang. The song poured out from its feathers as a cascade of glowing musical notes, which converged into a purifying stream of light, flowing steadily toward the diadem. The moment the cleansing touch met the diadem, sizzle! A sound like red-hot metal plunged into ice exploded through the room. The diadem's silver sheen snapped with a writhing black gas that crawled over its surface. The cleansing stream struck an invisible barrier and rippled. Black mist surged from deep within the diadem and condensed into a hideous, blurry outline of a snake's face. 2 clusters of crimson light burned in its hollow eye sockets. The snake face opened its maw and spat a torrent of pitch-black vapor at Wuan's golden notes. The golden notes fought to penetrate and dissolve the darkness, while the black mist devoured and corrupted the light. Air crackled with the sound of violent friction. Wuan's song climbed higher and purer, shedding more purifying notes. The snake-faced mist writhed and resisted, trying even to reverse corrode the bird's light. After about a minute of brutal tug-of-war, both sides were clearly exhausted. Wuan's golden glow dimmed, the black mist shrank and thinned. Lynn had been watching intently. When he saw Wuan start to show strain, he gave a sharp order. "Wuan, stop, come back!" The song cut off. The stream of light withdrew. Wuan folded in a graceful arc and perched on Lynn's outstretched arm, but its eyes remained fixed on the diadem, eager to keep fighting. The snake-faced mist, deprived of the cleansing pressure, let out a burst of mocking laughter. "Just you? A slightly brighter little bird? You want to destroy me and Ravenclaw's wisdom? My soul is forever bound to it. You are deluded, ignorant, foolish. Ha-ha." The laughter was shrill and full of contempt. Lynn opened his mouth to answer, but the mist showed no inclination to argue. It shrank and retracted, sucking itself back into the diadem. Master, it shrank back. Let me try again. I can force it out and purify it completely. Wuan pleaded, impatient. It hated such evil things being arrogant in front of its master, and it hated them hiding even more. Lynn stroked the bird's ruffled feathers and signaled for calm. The snake-face's words, "Me and Ravenclaw's creation, my soul is with it," carried heavy meaning. This truly was Ravenclaw's diadem. On that point alone, destroying it would be a grave loss. "No need. Rest, Wuan," Lynn said softly. "It likes to hide, doesn't it? Likes to hide inside a creation? Fine," he whispered to himself. "Hide well. Cherish the time you can still hide inside. It was easy. It was easy. It was easy." After defense against the dark arts in the corridor, students spilled out of the classroom in small groups, still talking about Snape's lesson. "Lynn, what do you think is wrong with Professor Lupin? Snape's teaching is, well, full of knowledge, but—" Edgar hunched his shoulders, still jumpy from being snapped at in class. Lynn was staring at a scrap of parchment in his hand and didn't look up. "I don't know. Maybe he's just ill," he said. Edgar glanced at the parchment and nearly choked on his words. The thing drawn on it was hardly presentable. Calling it shabby was generous. It was just awful. "Merlin, what are you drawing? That thing's a mess." Lynn hummed without much interest and kept walking. A few evenings later in the dormitory, William was arranging an essay, Ollie was buried in a spell book, and Edgar's stomach was growling. He looked toward Lynn's bed. Lynn sat cross-legged with that dreadful parchment spread out in front of him. "Lynn, want to head to the kitchens for a late-night snack?" Edgar asked. "Give your uniquely artistic masterpiece a rest." "No, you guys go. I've got to finish these little problems first." He bent back over the parchment. On a sunny afternoon, not long after, someone called, "Hey, Lynn, the weather's great. Why aren't you going fishing?" Lynn didn't slow. He waved his hand. "Not today. I'm busy." For days, Lynn was like that, consulting books or studying the diadem in his trunk. The ugly drawing became almost like a trademark. In the dormitory, tucked into corners of the Great Hall, even at the edge of the restricted section of the library, he was seen carving runes onto it. Late one night, Edgar watched him tracing complex paths on the parchment by lamplight and finally couldn't take it. "Lynn, that thing is so ugly. What is it actually for? I've asked you before, and you keep being so mysterious." William put his pen down and looked over. Ollie sat up a bit. Lynn stopped moving, set his quill down, and sighed. Under the curious stares of his three roommates, he put the drawing into his trunk. "You'll know when I get back." Without waiting for their reactions, he strode to the door and slammed it open. Bang! The three of them exchanged bewildered looks. Edgar blinked. Where's he going? High above Azkaban, Lynn had taken pains not to make things difficult for the guards. Rather than have Wuan drop him off at the front gate, he'd asked to be left hundreds of meters above the prison's main fortress. The North Sea night wind bit at him, tugging his cloak. Below, the prison windows glowed weak and miserable, as cold as the thin starlight. Lynn's goal was simple, to catch a suitable Dementor and bring it back. He had a twinge of regret. If he'd known how much trouble it would be, he wouldn't have let that crying Abba Abba Dementor go. Catching and training a new one was a hassle. As he scanned the prison below, nursing that annoyance, a strange, noisy commotion drifted faintly up from one block of cells. Abba, 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 stop! That's mine. Take turns. No grabbing, one voice squealed. G, first come, first served. Whoever sucks it gets it, another crowed. Ahaha, haha, what sweet despair. Let the master see my loyalty. More, I want more. Raucous laughter mingled with the other noises. Amid the greedy chittering, an Abba stood out, sounding almost familiar. Lynn lowered his altitude and looked toward the source. Outside a narrow cell door, several Dementors jostled, their hooded heads and ragged sleeves pressing around the gap. One Dementor had been pushed to the edge, waving its sleeves and making anxious Abba sounds, trying to protest. No way, Lynn muttered. Could this really be fate? He didn't hesitate. He raised his wand, expecto patronum. A silver-white light burst forth. The Patronus, a streak of brilliant radiance, darted toward the chaotic cell area. Wherever the light touched, the battling Dementors shrieked and scattered. One Dementor reacted half a beat late, perhaps too preoccupied with its protesting Abba to notice the silver light. By the time it saw what was happening, the Patronus had already swung around and was charging straight at it. "Abba!" came a brief, terrified squeal. No need to guess. Lynn knew this old acquaintance. "Abba! Abba, Abba!" it cried. "I didn't go out to hurt anyone. Why are you chasing and hitting me again?" it pleaded, hopping and dodging the Patronus, disheveled and aggrieved. "I'm here to take you home. Don't run. If you don't run, I won't chase." Lynn's voice came through the Patronus, clear as a bell. "What kind of home? To get beaten up?" The Dementor seemed to think, and it ran even faster. "Abba, you stop first." "You stop running first," Lynn replied. "Abba, Abba! If you stop, I'll stop. If you stop, I'll stop." They went back and forth, two stubborn children circling each other. Finally, under the relentless, patient pursuit of the Patronus, the Dementor lost its fight. It sagged in midair, its tattered cloak drooping, a defeated, almost pathetic aura about it. Lynn eased the Patronus back a little and drifted in front of the unresisting creature. "Why aren't you running anymore?" he asked, eyebrow raised, a teasing note in his voice. "Abba, Abba, Abba," it sobbed. Why must you chase me? There are lots of us out there. Over there, over there. Several just floated by. Catch them." The voice sounded almost tearful. Lynn remained unmoved. He tilted his head, considering, then gave an answer that seemed to make the Dementor wish it could vanish on the spot. "I've gotten used to hitting you." Short, blunt, perfectly justified. The Dementor's outline blurred further. "No more nonsense," Lynn said, dropping the teasing expression. He flicked his wrist. A trunk dropped smoothly into view in front of the Dementor and clicked open by itself. "Get in," he ordered. Chin lifted slightly. The Dementor made no reply. 154. Let Ravenclaw's crown be great again. "Lynn, why did you catch it again?" Edgar stared at the Dementor hovering before them, cawing a faint, uncertain "Abba, Abba," as if aggrieved and frightened at the same time. "That's not important," Lynn replied without looking up, his hands busy adjusting several rune arrays on the odd Dabian painting. The Dementor gibbered again, a soft, questioning "Abba, Abba, Abba?" Lynn froze, turned his head, and leveled his wand at the creature in an instant. Expecto Patronum, a bright Patronus flashed. Duang. The Dementor recoiled so violently its outline shrank. It fell to the side and stood rigid, not daring to move or make a sound. "Don't interrupt," Lynn rubbed his temples. "Where was I? Oh, right, that's not important. What's important is this." He pointed to a reinforced display stand nearby where the diadem rested. "This diadem is the legendary Ravenclaw diadem." Silence filled the trunk for a few seconds. Then Edgar couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing, pointing at the diadem and nearly doubling over. "Ha ha ha! Lynn, you're kidding, right? Something I pulled out of that junk pile in the room of requirement, and you call it the legendary Ravenclaw diadem? This is better than Ollie saying he's running for principal." He laughed until tears came, but when he saw there was no hint of mockery on Lynn's face, the laughter died in an awkward cough. Seriously, you're not joking?" Uncertainty creased Edgar's features. William and Ollie stared at the diadem, then at Lynn, shocked by the sudden claim. "Don't disbelieve it yet," Lynn said. He walked over to the diadem. "I've been working day and night these past few days studying it. It is Ravenclaw's diadem, but the problem is it's become an extremely dangerous dark artifact. An artifact as sinister as that tome I pulled out last time," he added, nodding toward the workbench. He pointed to the oddly painted canvas and to the Dementor, which was trying hard to keep itself unobtrusive. "This Dabian painting I made, and this special helper I invited here, serve a single purpose, to extract that filthy thing from the diadem and restore the diadem to how it should be." Lynn beckoned the Dementor. "Come here." The creature drifted closer, reluctant. "Abba," it murmured. "Do you see this diadem?" Lynn asked. The Dementor nodded. "Use that talent of yours. Suck out the happiness. Suck hard. But don't swallow it, and don't let it dissipate. Spit it into this painting." He pointed to the Dabian. The Dementor looked at the diadem, then at the grotesque painting, then back at Lynn, instinctively wanting to refuse. Its soul was incomplete, and it had no desire to consume such a thing. But under Lynn's roof, it had to obey. After a bit more coaxing and an implicit threat, the Dementor yielded. It hovered directly over the diadem, hesitated, then leaned its hollow face close. For a long moment there was no response, and the Dementor almost changed its mind. Then it drew in a deep, powerful breath and unleashed a tremendous suction toward the diadem. The diadem resisted. Its body vibrated, the blue gems flashed with black light, and a churning mass of black mist was ripped from deep within it. The smoke writhed and quickly reformed into that familiar snake-faced shape in midair. Presumptuous, lowly scum, how dare you? The snake face thrashed, trying to flee back into the safe nest of the diadem. Lynn didn't hesitate. He snatched the painting from the workbench and slapped it up against the Dementor's mouth. The snake-faced mist screamed. The moment it touched the canvas, the runes activated, forming countless black chains that bound it and dragged it into the painted heap of Dabian. The snake fought violently, spraying black mist everywhere, but the ceiling structure was perfect, designed for this purpose. Under a barrage of shrieks, the entire mass was sucked into the painting. On the canvas, within its previously abstract, twisted humanoid outline, an extra writhing dark mass now pulsed. The faint features of the snake face could still be seen in the shadow. "What is this thing? Ah, boy, let me out! How dare you treat the great? Ah, you will pay! Your soul will eternally." Faint roars came from inside the painting. Lynn sneered and tapped the frame with his wand. A cover slid over the painting, and the curses went silent. Only the dark shadow battered impotently against its enclosure. "Got a foul mouth, do you? Keep at it," Lynn sneered at the painting. "Oh, almost forgot. Whatever you're saying, I can't hear you." "Enjoy yourself," he thought. "This is the single room I prepared for you, an eternal VIP seat with intermittent purification treatments, the immortal curse. You can't die, but you won't want to live." He turned to his roommates. Edgar, William, and Ollie stood stunned, like statues, their mouths slightly open. From the Dementor pulling out the black mist, to the snake face screaming, to Lynn's crude but effective ceiling, and finally the soundproof cover, everything had happened so fast and so decisively it left them speechless. Questions buzzed in their heads, but the most urgent came from William. This really is Ravenclaw's diadem?" he murmured. Lynn nodded. William picked up the diadem and set it on his head. Instantly his body trembled. A cool clarity flooded through his mind. Thoughts that had been muddled snapped into focus. Potion ratios that had stumped him for days, a naughty ancient runes translation, solutions and key insights came to him like a tide, inspiration sparking almost ready to spill out. It wasn't a literal injection of knowledge or wisdom out of thin air. It was a dramatic increase in mental efficiency, the incubator for ideas to form. "Are you going to keep it?" William asked, removing the diadem and offering it to Lynn. Lynn handed it back to Edgar. "Edgar found it. It's his to decide. Besides, I could craft one of these myself with the same effect." Edgar looked at the diadem in his hands, thought for a long moment, and finally made his choice, to make Ravenclaw's diadem great again at Hogwarts. 155. What is fake can never become real. Morning sunlight filtered through the high windows and cast dappled shadows along the stone corridor on the 8th floor of the castle. Edgar stood before the gargoyle, clutching a crumpled piece of parchment, his face full of suspicion and uncertainty. Lynn had shoved the list into his hand early that morning. Dozens of candy names scrawled in messy handwriting, all bestsellers from Honeydukes. Lynn said if I just read it aloud, the gargoyle would step aside. Edgar muttered, glancing down at the paper. "Is this reliable? Is this another prank?" He took a breath and began reading, voice tight with doubt. "Bertie Bott's every flavor beans?" The gargoyle's stone eyes seemed to narrow, and it turned its head away, presenting the back of its head to him. "Not this one, then? Blood pops? No movement. Still not it? Chocolate frogs?" Nothing. Sweat beaded on Edgar's forehead. He forced himself to go on. "Fizzing Whizbees? Drubel's best blowing gum? Pepper imps? Ice mice? Sugar quills?" After naming more than a dozen sweets, the statue remained utterly still, not the slightest tremor. The corridor was so quiet he could hear portraits snoring somewhere down the hall. Edgar glared at the increasingly suspicious list, anger rising in him. "Fuck," he hissed, crumpling the paper into a ball. "I knew it. Lynn's definitely pulling my leg." Knowing Lynn, he could imagine him crouched somewhere with a telescope, watching his embarrassment. "One last try," Edgar muttered, smoothing the paper into a rough line. "If this doesn't work, I'm gone. Cockroach clusters?" As soon as the words left his mouth, the gargoyle came to life. Its joints ground as it turned, and the section of wall behind it swung open to reveal a spiral stone staircase. Edgar stared, dumbfounded. "So it really was that?" he whispered, staring at the list in his hand, and then at the statue that had just obeyed Lynn's suggestion. Unsure whether to admire Lynn's inventiveness or complain about the principal's taste in sweets, he stuffed the list into his pocket, drew a steadying breath, and climbed the stairs. Outside the principal's office door, he knocked. The sound echoed. A voice answered. "Come in." He pushed the door open. Portraits of past principals lined the walls, some dozing, others peering curiously at the visitor. In the corners, thin-legged silver contraptions hissed and puffed faint smoke. Fawkes the Phoenix was preening on his perch. Behind a broad desk sat Dumbledore, but Edgar's arrival didn't find the headmaster bent over parchment or sampling sweets. Dumbledore held an object in both hands, his expression so intent it was almost solemn. It was a diadem. Silver, set with sapphires, the design ancient, and it looked exactly like the one Edgar had tucked into his pocket. Dumbledore's fingers brushed the rim, his brow creased in thought. Where on earth is the real diadem? The old principal wondered. The imitation in front of him was exquisitely made. Traces of age and wear had been copied perfectly, even the peculiar texture of erosion by the dark arts. For most people, it would be impossible to tell real from fake. But Dumbledore was not an ordinary man, and more importantly, the Sorting Hat had spoken when he put the diadem before it. "Imposter! Ravenclaw's creation does not smell like this. It is tainted with the fishy stench of a snake and the aura of hypocrisy. Albus, where did you get such a clumsy imitation?" Tom had been talented, able to make even a Horcrux feel convincing. But a fake remained a fake. Dumbledore stepped out of his reverie, and noticing the student in the doorway, set the diadem on the desk and smiled gently. "Good morning, child. Have you encountered some difficulty?" Edgar's fingers twisted the edge of his robes. "Good morning, Principal. He stammered until, flushed and fumbling, he reached into his inner coat pocket and brought out an object wrapped carefully in soft cloth. He laid the bundle on the desk and unwrapped it. Silver light flowed. The sapphires gleamed clear as water. Dumbledore's smile froze. The composed, legendary wizard rose from his chair and leaned over the desk to stare at the two diadems side by side, one bright and genuine, the other older and muddied by imitation. For a heartbeat, his usual composure slipped. He cleared his throat, sat back more slowly, and spoke in a softer voice than Edgar had ever heard from him. "Oh, child, don't be nervous. Sit. Would you care for a lemon sherbet, cockroach clusters, or hot cocoa?" "Sea cocoa, please. Thank you." The cocoa appeared on the desk as if conjured. When Edgar had relaxed enough to sit, Dumbledore asked the question that mattered most. "Child, can you tell me where and how you obtained this diadem?" Edgar took a deep breath and told the story. Losing the snitch during Quidditch practice, finding a decorative replacement in the room of requirement on the 8th floor, taking it home as a curiosity, and the events of the previous night involving Lynn, carefully omitting the parts about the Dementor, the snake-faced thing, and that painting. He summarized instead that Lynn had transferred the dark arts influence from the diadem. "So it was hidden under my nose all these years," Dumbledore murmured, eyes blinking behind his half-moon spectacles. His expression grew serious. "One more question. Did you, or did Lynn, ever wear this diadem? Even for only a moment?" Edgar started at Dumbledore's tone and shook his head quickly. "No, Lynn said it must not be worn. He said it had dark arts on it. He even used the levitation charm to lift it." Dumbledore's shoulders visibly relaxed and a smile returned. "You have done very well, child. Exceptionally well." He paused. "Because of you and Lynn, Ravenclaw's diadem has been recovered, 100 points to Hufflepuff. Furthermore, you and Lynn will jointly receive the special award for merit to Hogwarts. This honor is not given lightly, but you both deserve it." After that, the conversation grew lighter. Dumbledore asked about Edgar's classes, his Quidditch training, and even chatted briefly about the latest sweets at Honeyduke's. Edgar remained restless, partly from the pressure of being in the principal's office, partly because he wanted to get back and tell Lynn the good news. After about 15 minutes, Dumbledore kindly brought the meeting to a close and walked Edgar to the door. The door shut behind him. Edgar let out a long breath and practically ran down the spiral staircase. Silence returned to the office. Dumbledore stood alone before his desk, his gaze moving between the two diadems. A soft crackling sound popped in the air, then the office was empty. At the same moment, on the shore of the Black Lake, the water reflected the towering silhouette of the castle. Dumbledore appeared on the grass and looked across the water. There, on the far bank, someone was fishing, rod in hand. He had learned his lesson. This time, to avoid yanking a few more strands from Lynn's beard, he had apparated to a spot that wouldn't startle the fishing rod out of his hands. The principal's office. Lynn couldn't remember how many times he'd been here. It was enough for him to know the layout like the back of his hand. He waved casually at Fawkes perched nearby. The Phoenix lazily opened one eye in reply. Lynn pulled out the chair opposite Dumbledore's desk and dropped into it as if he were in the Hufflepuff common room. "Would you like some?" "Coke is fine," Lynn interrupted. "Sprite is okay too." For 1 second the office stalled. Dumbledore's lips moved. Tea or pumpkin juice died unspoken on them. He blinked. "I don't have any here." Before he could finish, the crisp pop of a can opening sounded unusually loud in the quiet room. A red and white aluminum can slid through the air and landed in Lynn's palm, its surface beaded with condensation. Lynn pulled the tab with practiced fingers, tipped his head back, took a long swallow, and emitted a satisfied belch. "Well, perhaps my understanding of Hogwarts' kitchen inventory isn't quite complete," he said with a sheepish laugh, setting the can on the desk. "This is actually from my personal stash in the cold storage," he added. "By the way, Principal, why did you ask for me?" Dumbledore didn't answer at once. His gaze drifted to the center of the desk, where two diadems lay side by side. "I asked you because Mr. Burns told me you had purged the dark residue attached to this," he said. His voice sharpened. "I want to see what you transferred it into. It's important. I need to confirm a few things." Lynn nodded and fished in his pocket. He produced a piece of parchment folded into a neat square and handed it to Dumbledore. The portraits in the office leaned forward as if to listen. Even Fawkes stilled. Dumbledore took a breath and unfolded the parchment on the desk. The image was revealed. Dumbledore's eyebrows twitched. Inwardly, he was taken aback by the crude execution. It was almost a caricature of a proper drawing, but his attention fixed on the center. There, a mass of darkness slammed against the flatness of the parchment, thrashing at messy runic bindings as if trying to claw its way out. The shadow hissed and spat, its voice written across the drawing in jagged script. "You filthy mudblood, lowly scum. When I get out, I'll tear your soul to shreds and leave you to wail in eternal torment." Dumbledore watched the shadow in silence. After a long moment, he whispered one simple word: "Tom." The writhing on the parchment stopped so abruptly it was like someone had flipped a switch. The office fell into a heavy, stunned silence. "Tom?" Lynn couldn't contain himself. "Tom? The diary Tom." Dumbledore nodded slowly, eyes still on the drawing. "The same Tom." "But wasn't he already?" Lynn fumbled, gesturing. "Wasn't that diary destroyed?" "Clearly," Dumbledore said, his tone grave. "Tom arranged more complicated means for his immortality." He finally looked up at Lynn. "Child, I'm afraid I cannot return this to you. It must be destroyed." "No, Dumbledore, you can't." His protest cut off as a cluster of fiendfire leapt from the tip of Dumbledore's wand. The flame drifted, deliberate and fearsome, toward a corner of the parchment. In an instant, the fire swallowed the entire drawing. Where the image had been, there was only ash and a faint, smoky scent. A breeze scattered the remains until nothing could be salvaged. Silence settled back into the office. Lynn stared at the empty desk, then at Dumbledore, blinking. "Principal, we agreed on looking," he said. "How did looking turn into a live cremation? Isn't that a bit fast?" Dumbledore, for once, looked slightly abashed. "These circumstances are special. It had to be completely destroyed without hesitation." He walked to the bookshelf behind him and let his fingers pass along the spines before selecting an old, well-kept notebook. He placed it in front of Lynn. "This will be your compensation," he said, his usual gentle tone restored. "It contains some of my notes from when I was young and learning, and a few less common spells. It may prove useful to you." Lynn's eyes lit up. Who cared about the drawing anymore? The notebook was a prize. He adopted a face of mock reluctance. "Oh, Principal, you're too formal. Insights and the like. If you enjoy burning drawings, I'll make you a few more to destroy later. I promise they'll be even livelier than that one." He tucked the notebook into his robes, while Dumbledore's mouth twitched in amusement. "Well," Lynn rose. "Anything else, Principal? If not, I'll be off. I have herbology this afternoon. Professor Sprout said we're learning how to brush the teeth of venomous tentacula. Sounds fun, doesn't it?" "Go on, child." Dumbledore smiled and nodded. Lynn, clutching his new treasure, walked out with a light stride. The door closed behind him, and the office returned to its hush. A few seconds later, the portraits burst into chatter as if a mute button had been released. "Albus, congratulations! You found another one!" Phineas Nigellus crowed. "Merlin's beard, that's the second, isn't it?" "What a remarkable discovery," Madame Dillis Derwent purred. A stern, handlebar-mustached former headmaster boomed. "How many of these abominations did Tom Riddle make? A Horcrux, what a violation of life. He dared to split his soul more than once." "Who cares how many he made?" snapped another ex-principal with a red nose. "Find them and destroy them, every single one." At that moment, the doorknob turned, and the voices fell silent, as if someone had grabbed them by the throat. The door cracked open, and Lynn's head popped back in, an embarrassed smile on his face. Principal, I think I forgot my fishing rod." Dumbledore turned slowly. "Child, did you hear anything while you were outside?" Lynn blinked. "Not much. I heard several principals talking about congratulating you for finding a Horcrux or something." Dumbledore's face tightened. "Child, I think we need to talk." That evening, Lynn practically ran out of the headmaster's office, clutching the notebook. As the door closed behind him, he could have sworn the portraits let out suppressed snickers. Run. He had to run. For the first time in his life, he truly understood the weight of a headmaster's earnest teachings. Dumbledore's verbal stamina had been terrifying. It had started that morning when Lynn had accidentally said the word Horcrux. The headmaster's response had been quiet, almost gentle. No shouting, no interrogation, no show of surprise. He rose slowly, walked to the window, looked out at the bright grounds, and sighed. "Child, I think we need to have a good talk." That talk stretched into an 8-hour marathon of ideological education. Dumbledore began not with magic techniques, but with the origin of life, not biologically, but philosophically. He explained concepts like resonance with life and the uniqueness and integrity of the soul with vivid metaphors. "Imagine your soul is a unique painting," he said. "A Horcrux is a crude photocopy. Each time you copy it, the colors fade, the spirit bleeds away." Then he spoke of the meaning of life. "Hufflepuff values integrity and loyalty," he said. "But do you know why those qualities are precious? Because they protect the self as a whole, an honest embrace of life's journey." At first, Lynn sat bolt upright, doing his best to look attentive. But as the clock in the office crawled past 1, his eyelids waged a losing battle. Is this ever going to end? It's past lunch, he thought, and his stomach obligingly growled. Dumbledore glanced at the clock and smiled. Lunchtime is almost over. We shan't go to the Great Hall. Let us eat here and continue our conversation." "Continue?" Lynn watched as the headmaster waved his wand, and an extravagant spread of Chinese dishes appeared on the small round table. Translucent shrimp dumplings, glistening roast duck, steamed sea bass, mapo tofu, and even a pot of Buddha jumps over the wall, among other delicacies. "The house elves have studied cuisines from around the world," Dumbledore said as he pulled out a chair. "Child, we can taste these while exploring the relationship between power and responsibility." Lynn tried to protest. "Professor Sprout, herbology, this afternoon." Dumbledore waved a piece of char siu and a letter slid into view. "Fawkes has delivered a note to Pomona. She understands and asked me to tell you to remember to see her for makeup lessons." So Lynn resigned himself and picked up his chopsticks. The afternoon session continued, this time focused on why the dark arts are dangerous. "It's not only the harm they do to others," Dumbledore said between sips of tea, "but the corruption they bring on the wielder. They twist desires, cloud judgment, and in the end, you become a slave to power." He spoke of Horcruxes, the splitting of the soul to escape death, and how that solution damages the soul itself. The sun slid west and the light in the office softened. The house elves cleared the dishes and set out black tea and lemon cakes. Dumbledore turned to metaphysics. "Fear of death is natural," he said, watching the sky go gold and red. But fear often grows from the unknown. If you view death as another great adventure, an inevitable journey every life takes, then the obsession with immortality appears narrow. Lynn nodded because he had to. He was nearly asleep, and besides, he had never had any intention of making a Horcrux. When the castle's evening bell finally rang, Dumbledore offered his first genuinely relaxed smile of the day. "Thank you for listening to this old man's rambling," he said, standing to pat Lynn on the shoulder. "You may go. Remember, the diadem of wisdom should crown a complete soul, not a shattered obsession." Lynn felt as if he'd been granted amnesty. He grabbed the notebook and moved to leave. "Oh, one more thing," Dumbledore added as Lynn reached the door. "If you encounter anything like a diadem, tell me immediately. My office is always open if you wish to speak more." Lynn pretended not to hear, waved without looking back, and bolted. Are you kidding? It wasn't even clear whether Tom had any more Horcruxes, let alone how he could possibly run into them all. He slammed the dormitory door so hard it hit the wall. "I'm back!" He tossed the notebook onto the bed, slumped into a chair, and stared at the ceiling. Edgar, who had been concentrating on Wizard's chess, was so startled that his hand jerked and his knight accidentally smashed his own queen to bits. William and Ollie looked up from their books. "Lynn?" Edgar demanded. "Where have you been all day? You didn't answer when I called. If the headmaster hadn't said you were excused, we would have gone to his office." When Edgar noticed the notebook on the bed, his face went pale. "Wait, what's that? Don't tell me you brought back another Tom." Lynn waved a hand. "Don't say his name. I was in the headmaster's office for about a day of deluxe moral education, magical ethics, and life philosophy." He rubbed his sore face. "As for this notebook, don't worry. It's not creepy like Tom. It's compensation from Dumbledore for handing over that art piece." "Compensation?" William pushed his glasses up and leaned over. "The headmaster gave it to you? What's inside?" Lynn sat at the desk and flipped it open under the lamp. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, notes on basic transfiguration, insights, and new perspectives. "Wow," William breathed, a scholar's excitement lighting his features. "These ideas are really unique." Lynn kept turning pages. The entries grew deeper and stranger, little-known spells and unusual approaches. "Path of the Fire God? I've never even seen that in the library." A faint inner prompt clicked. Ding! Path of the Fire God has been recorded. Lynn's spirits lifted as he read on. Water prison spell. Ding! Water prison spell has been recorded. The dormitory fell into the soft rustle of pages and quiet exclamations. Light and shadow weaving, using light to braid brief, tangible constructs. William read. Memory replay, projecting specific memory fragments as three-dimensional images. You can even change the perspective. Lynn's exhaustion evaporated. He leaned closer, almost forgetting the long day. Edgar and William peered over his shoulder, amazed less by the notebook than by Lynn himself. How could he flip through so fast and understand it all? 158. Political Achievements. The Minister for Magic's office, Cornelius Fudge, sat behind his desk, half listening to Dolores Umbridge as she reported the annual Flu Network maintenance budget for the Department of Magical Transportation. He flipped through the newly delivered copy of the Daily Prophet. His eye skimmed a front-page item on Gringotts' new security measures, skipped a photograph of a shop opening in Diagon Alley, and stopped when a commentary took up a large column. The headline stabbed at him. Should the current Minister for Magic step down? Rita Skeeter. Fudge's smile froze. He read the first lines. The color drained from his face and turned a livid pig liver purple. Umbridge kept prattling on. Therefore, I suggest increasing the budget by another 5% to ensure the absolute safety and smoothness of our Wizarding World's main transportation artery. This will undoubtedly be another significant manifestation of political achievement under your wise leadership, Minister. Useless. Fudge slammed the paper down so hard it skittered to the floor. He sprang up, spittle almost spraying across the desk toward Umbridge. They're all useless. What on earth are the Ministry's aurors doing, and those brainless dementors, one Sirius Black and two werewolves, and after hunting them for so long, they haven't so much as taken a single hair? Is Azkaban a public toilet? People walk in and out as they please? His voice echoed through the quiet office. The prophet asks me every day what measures I'm taking. The public is questioning the ministry's efficiency. I can hardly keep things from spinning with the International Confederation of Wizards. Useless. All of them are useless. Umbridge fell silent at the outburst. For a moment she looked stunned. Then, as always, she switched back into her practiced mode of flatteries. Minister, please calm yourself. You must take care of your health. She bent to pick up the newspaper. Those fugitives are nothing more than rats in the gutter. Sooner or later, they'll be brought to justice by our brave Aurors. As for those ignorant comments from people who don't know the truth, they are simply not worth an esteemed figure like you getting riled about. She glanced down at the paper in her hands. Rita Skeeter's flamboyant prose cut through the page like a knife. The article was merciless, picking apart Fudge's tenure. Under Minister Fudge's highly effective leadership, Azkaban, a fortress that should be impregnable, has suffered 2 jaw-dropping mass breakouts in short order. The Auror office's capture operations have been as sluggish as if struck with a Petrificus totalis. It is reported that Minister Fudge generously awarded himself an Order of Merlin, first class, to commend his outstanding contributions to maintaining the safety of the wizarding world. Such blatant self-glorification has truly tarnished the ancient honor of the Order of Merlin. Furthermore, figures in the education sector have pointed out with distress that Minister Fudge has cut funding for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry year after year, leading to a worrying stagnation, or even decline, in the teaching of this 1,000-year-old institution. Looking across Minister Fudge's term, aside from skillfully attending various ribbon-cutting ceremonies and delivering empty speeches, it is difficult to name any substantive political achievements that might be remembered as benefiting ordinary witches and wizards. Umbridge's eyelids twitched as she read, inwardly cursing Rita for stirring trouble. Oh, Minister, do you know that woman Rita Skeeter? She loves to catch shadows and turn them into stories. She thrives on sensationalism. Her pieces wouldn't be taken seriously by a house elf. Everyone in the ministry and across the wizarding world knows what kind of man you are. There's no reason to be angry about such baseless slander. Fudge's chest heaved. The worst part was, most of it was true. The breakouts had happened. He had accepted the Order of Merlin himself. He had cut Hogwarts funding under the pretext of economic difficulties. And as for political achievements, he could think of little worth recording. This has to be fixed, he said, staring at Umbridge. There must be a sufficiently weighty, positive event to divert everyone's attention. Do you have any ideas? Umbridge's mind went to work. She needed a plan that would please the minister and actually be feasible. Her small, toad-like eyes brightened. Minister, do you remember the True Wizard tournament from long ago? She asked cautiously, gauging him. Fudge frowned. Triwizard? That's ancient history. It was discontinued because it was too dangerous. We need solutions for now, not nostalgia. What I mean, Umbridge leaned in, is we could restart it, and not just the 3 European schools. We could expand it into a true international magical event. The tapping of Fudge's fingers on the desk stopped. He narrowed his eyes and listened. Umbridge went on quickly, striking while the iron was hot. Imagine you leading the revival and expansion of that legendary tournament. What a sparkling diplomatic and educational achievement it would be. It would present a new image of the British ministry, open, progressive, and committed to cultivating young witches and wizards. Successfully hosting such an event would be undeniable proof of your leadership. If it goes exceptionally well, perhaps the International Confederation of Wizards, or even the Order of Merlin, might consider awarding you another medal. Fudge's eyes brightened. That idea is very constructive. Dolores, I'll leave you to take the lead on this. Draw up a feasible plan as soon as possible. It will be my honor to serve you, Minister. Umbridge bowed deeply, her voice saccharine. A few days later, a thestral-drawn carriage bearing the ministry crest touched down on the grounds of Hogwarts. Cornelius Fudge, flanked by several Aurors, walked toward the castle. In the headmaster's office, Albus Dumbledore sat calmly behind his desk, watching Fudge approach. Dumbledore, long time no see. The last time we— Let us get straight to business, Cornelius. Dumbledore interrupted gently. Fudge's practiced pleasantries died on his lips. He felt a flush of annoyance, but he forced himself onward. "Very well, Dumbledore," Fudge said, leaning forward as if confiding a great secret. "The Ministry has decided to restart the Tri-Wizard Tournament. Or perhaps now the Six-Wizard Tournament. We hope Hogwarts will take part as one of the hosts." Dumbledore listened without surprise, only nodding for him to continue. Fudge plowed on. "Beauxbatons and Durmstrang have already agreed. They are enthusiastic. But Uagadou, Ilvermorny, and Castellabruxo are more cautious." He paused, watching Dumbledore's face, then delivered the real request. "They've suggested sending a group of students to Hogwarts on an exchange so they can experience it here before deciding whether to participate officially." "So," Fudge said, lowering his voice, "this exchange has become critical. It will determine whether the Six-Wizard Tournament can succeed and shape the international image and influence of the British wizarding world. As host, Hogwarts has a heavy and important responsibility." Dumbledore remained quiet a few moments, then looked out of the window. "Cornelius, as headmaster of Hogwarts, I should naturally support measures that promote international magical education and exchange. For young witches and wizards, such opportunities are invaluable." Fudge's spirits rose, until Dumbledore continued. "But you must understand the other schools' concerns. The heads of those schools must be responsible for their students. Given the current situation at Hogwarts and its surroundings, I cannot call this an environment that would reassure them." Fudge's expression fell. He knew only too well why. The Dementors posted around Hogwarts. He had insisted on their deployment himself, as a show of how seriously the Ministry treated Sirius Black's escape. A silence settled. After a moment's struggle, Fudge set his jaw. "I understand your concerns, Dumbledore," he said, trying for sincerity. "To ensure the international exchange and any tournament that follows can proceed, I have decided to withdraw the Dementors stationed around Hogwarts and Hogsmeade." Dumbledore regarded him for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. 159. Guests from afar, ding-a-ling. The dismissal bell freed the students from History of Magic. Lynn closed his blank notebook and drifted with the crowd toward the Great Hall. "What do you think Dumbledore wants, suddenly requiring all houses to be present before dinner?" he asked. William adjusted his glasses. "The notice was issued by each house dean. The tone was formal but not urgent, so it's probably not a sudden safety issue. Maybe it's something to do with the international magical cooperation the prophet's been writing about?" Lynn yawned and rubbed his cheek. "Why bother guessing? We'll find out when we get there. I'm hungry. Hope this doesn't delay dinner." His stomach obligingly gave a small rumble. A few Ravenclaw girls nearby covered their mouths and giggled. When they reached the hall, the teachers were already seated at the staff table. All eyes were on Dumbledore. Lynn and the others found seats at the Hufflepuff table, and the row behind them erupted with excited chatter. "I bet they're announcing an inter-house Quidditch friendly," someone said. "Maybe the Ministry's coming for an inspection? Is Hogwarts finally introducing dark arts classes? My dad says it's about time." "Quiet! Headmaster Dumbledore is about to speak," someone shouted, and the noise died down. Dumbledore had picked up the spoon beside him, as if to tap his goblet, but seeing everyone already quiet, he set it down again with a small, awkward smile. "Good evening." His voice was gentle. "First, allow me to apologize for taking up your dinner. I have an announcement of considerable importance for the whole school. I am delighted to tell you that, in the near future, Hogwarts will welcome a very special group of visitors. They will be traveling from distant continents to spend a fortnight with us, engaging in magical exchange and study." Guests? Exchange and study. Low murmurs ran along the tables. Yes, they will be arriving from Uagadou School of Magic in Africa, Ilvermorny School of Magic in North America, and Castellabruxo, deep within the South American rainforest. This will be an excellent opportunity to deepen intercontinental magical understanding and broaden our horizons. During their stay, the visitors will live at Hogwarts, attend classes with you, dine in the Great Hall, take part in activities, and experience Hogwarts' unique learning atmosphere. Specific arrangements will be announced later by your house deans. And now, he glanced around with a mischievous tilt to his mouth, I think we can temporarily divert our abundant curiosity to a more pressing matter. At Hogwarts, nothing comes before a good dinner. At once, the previously empty plates and goblets filled with a dazzling array of food and drink. Dumbledore was the first to lift his spoon. The hall erupted. Talk, excited shouts, 100 questions all at once, though the news itself clearly gripped the students more than the meal. The Hufflepuff table, however, reacted in their usual practical fashion. Initial surprise passed quickly. They cut what needed cutting, ate what needed eating, and poured what needed pouring. Conversation continued, but it never interrupted the meal. Ouagadough, a fifth-year murmured, spooning gravy onto his baked potato. They're famous for nonverbal charms and transfiguration, aren't they? Ilvermorny has 4 houses, the girl beside him added, scooping peas. Each corresponds to a different magical creature. Castellabruxo's in the rainforest. Its herbology must be incredible. The 7th year across from Lynn chewed thoughtfully on his roll. Edgar, mouthful of sausage, mumbled with a speech full of meat. Doesn't matter where they're from, they're guests. Eat up so you've got strength to welcome them. And speared another piece of steak. William adjusted his glasses. This is a rare chance for academic exchange. I'll need to reprioritize my studies. Time slipped by like the slow current of the Black Lake. Preparations, both subtle and thorough, were made inside and outside the castle. Suits of armor were polished, particularly foul-mouthed portraits were politely reminded to behave, and seasonal magical flowers appeared in the common rooms. Finally, the day of the visitors' arrival came. It was a clear afternoon. The faculty and students gathered early on the lawn in front of Hogwarts, standing in neat house lines. Keep quiet and show Hogwarts composure, Professor McGonagall whispered behind them, though her own back was straighter than anyone's. They didn't have long to wait. The first guests arrived before the others. A milky white mist began to spread across the lawn without warning. It was neither damp nor cold. Rather, it smelled faintly of sun-warmed grass and an unfamiliar sweetness. The mist thickened over a central patch of the lawn, and tiny points of silvery light began to glow within it. Shapes formed in the shifting light and shadow. The mist parted gently, and a group of people walked out. Leading them was a tall, erect old man who still radiated vigor. He wore a simple white robe. Around his neck hung a necklace strung with seeds, small bone fragments, and metal rings. He carried a smooth wooden staff. Dumbledore's face brightened, and he strode forward to greet him. Babatunde, it's been too long. How was the journey across the continent? Babatunde Aokoye, principal of Ouagadough, opened his arms and greeted Dumbledore with a cheek-to-cheek kiss. Albus, my old friend, the journey was pleasant. Hogwarts is as magnificent as ever. Behind him were about 20 Ouagadough students of various ages in robes similar in style to their principals. Most did not carry wands. They watched Hogwarts' towers and the gathered students with clear curiosity. Lynn's gaze swept across the group and then froze. Among them, he spotted a familiar face, Amina Okoro. Their eyes met across the lawn. She smiled, then resumed a composed posture. Lynn nodded in return. No sooner had the Ouagadough group settled than the sky changed. Dark clouds rolled in and thickened with alarming speed. The air felt charged. Before anyone could react, crack! A brilliant bolt of lightning split the clouds and struck the lawn. At the same instant, a rushing cascade of water poured down. The strike did not hit the assembled students, but fell on a different patch of grass. Light and steam swirled, and where they had landed, 2 new groups materialized. Leading the left group was a dignified witch with carefully arranged hair and a tailored dark green robe, a shawl embroidered with the Ilvermorny crest thrown over her shoulders. This was Agatha Peakery, principal of Ilvermorny. Lynn noticed another familiar face among her students, Ryan Sanderson, standing nearby. To the right, a vibrant wizard in a practical leather jacket strode forward, colorful feather ornaments hanging around his neck. He was Fernando Lima, principal of Castellabruxo. Dumbledore turned to them with his customary warm smile. Welcome. Welcome to all of you who have traveled so far. Welcome to Hogwarts. Agatha Peakery inclined her head. Thank you for the invitation, Headmaster Dumbledore. Ilvermorny is honored to take part in this exchange. Fernando Lima stepped forward eagerly and shook Dumbledore's hand, beaming. Thank you for your hospitality, and for this magnificent castle. 1 in 60, Fuse. The arrival of 3 foreign wizarding schools was like throwing colored stones into the ancient lake of Hogwarts. The castle grew even more alive. Different accents filled the corridors. Robes of unfamiliar cuts and colors wandered the staircases. Curious magical trinkets appeared on every desk, and every nook of the castle was explored as if newly discovered. For the sake of communication and order, the visiting students had been billeted among the four houses. Perhaps because of temperament, many of the cranberry-robed Ilvermorny students found themselves in Slytherin and Ravenclaw. Although Ilvermorny's division by bloodlines wasn't the same as Slytherin's, there was a similarity in atmosphere, and their hunger for knowledge fit naturally with Ravenclaw. It wasn't unusual to see Ilvermorny pupils debating interpretations of ancient runes with Ravenclaws. Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, meanwhile, hosted more students from Ouagadougou and Castellabruxo. Transfiguration that day was exceptionally crowded, since pupils from the three schools had joined the class. Professor McGonagall stood at the podium as composed as ever. Anyone looking closely would notice a new brooch pinned to her robes. "Today's work will be more difficult," she announced, her clear voice carrying across the room. "The rat in front of you will not be turned into a goblet or a button. Your task is to turn it into a cat of roughly the same size. This involves transformation between life forms and is the foundation for advanced transfiguration and, in time, for understanding human transfiguration." She stressed the word foundation and let her gaze sweep over the eager faces. Then she carefully explained the techniques they should watch for during the transformation. Finally, she tapped the podium with her wand. "You may begin," she said. "Remember, precision and control are more important than speed." The students sprang into action. Most of the Hogwarts pupils raised their wands, brows knitted, chanting at the trembling rats. The Ilvermorny students also used wands, but their, what Lynn thought of as distinctly American stances and rhythms, made their incantations sound different. A few Castellabruxo students produced dried leaves or small stones from pouches to help guide the form. Amina, sitting beside Lynn, did not touch the wand on the table. She rubbed her hands together as if warming them, and then her fingers began to weave a rapid sequence of intricate gestures. Her lips moved, and her eyes locked on the gray rate. A faint radiance flowed from her fingertips and wrapped the creature. Its outline wavered, then reshaped. Fur receded and regrew. Bones clicked quietly, the tail shortened, and the head shifted. The whole process had a fluid, rhythmic, almost organic quality, different from the crisp, wand-driven transfigurations most of the class used. When the light faded, the rat had vanished. In its place sat a hairless cat. Amina breathed out, smiling, and stroked the cat's head. Lynn looked from the creature to Amina's small, satisfied grin and couldn't resist teasing. "I didn't expect that. Your transfiguration is a lot better than that alchemy thing you did in the competition." Amina shot him a glare and lowered her voice. "That alchemy competition was full of accidents. Besides, Ouagadougou students are born with transfiguration talent, especially animagus." Pride for her school colored her tone. The mention of animagus left Lynn speechless. He hadn't learned it, bluntly, because it required keeping a mandrake leaf in one's mouth for long practice, which made eating difficult, and because you couldn't cast spells while in animal form. Seeing Lynn fall silent, Amina pressed on, sensing an opening. She poked his arm. "By the way, Lynn, isn't that strict Professor McGonagall on the podium an animagus?" Lynn was genuinely surprised. Professor McGonagall being an animagus was well known at Hogwarts, but Amina had only been at the school a few days. How did she guess? "How do you know?" Amina shrugged. "Just a feeling. Watching the way she moves, her eyes. Some people who are good at transfiguration give off that same vibe." Her explanation sounded almost mystical, but she looked certain. Magical talent could be inexplicable, Lynn conceded, and gave no reply. "Ahem," she went on, pointing to the rat by Lynn. "Finish your assignment before you go poking about." "You're not terrible at transfiguration, are you?" she drawled. Lynn picked up the wand on the table in a casual motion. He didn't strike a dramatic pose. His wrist flicked lightly. The tip of the wand tapped the air. A quick silver glow wrapped the gray rat, and the transformation happened in an instant, so fast it was almost a blur. When the light died, a round-headed British shorthair with silver-gray fur sat dignified on the table, even raising a paw to lick itself. The spell was clean, efficient, and the cat's expression captured the honest, slightly aloof look British Shorthairs are known for. Amina studied the cat for 2 seconds and clicked her tongue. Tsk, I thought I'd finally have something to mock you with. What a pity. She turned back to fuss over her unusually lively hairless cat. Lynn smiled and didn't mind. At some point, McGonagall had walked close by. Her eyes lingered on Lynn's British Shorthair and Amina's cat for a moment. A hint of approval passing over her face before she resumed her stern composure and moved on to the next pupil in need of guidance. Class passed in focused practice and low murmurs. Before they knew it, it was lunchtime. Students filed out in groups and poured into the great hall. Lynn and his friends made their way to a long table and sat down, the smell of food making mouths water. Lynn had just lifted a roasted chicken leg toward his mouth when, "I want to duel you! This Saturday, dueling club. Do you dare?" A shout full of fury erupted from the Slytherin table and cut through the hum of conversation. Hundreds of heads turned. Marcus Flint stood with eyes blazing, his finger jabbing toward the boy opposite him. His face was red, his chest heaving with anger. The target was an all-too-familiar rival, Ryan Sanderson from Ilvermorny. Ryan met Marcus's challenge without backing down, swatting the pointing hand aside. "If you can't even get a charm to work in class, don't come boasting. Dueling club on Saturday? I accept."